Chapter 2175. Nie Tian stared at Lin Shan with an expression of extreme shock, unable to speak for a long time. Fat Cat said that Lin Shan was a 9 elements unite as one martial artist, and the 9 meridians in his body were awakened at the same time. 9 elemental meridians awakened at the same time. After a long time, Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he said in his heart, "Is this possible?" Everyone he had seen before had their strength increase bit by bit. 9 elemental meridians awakened at the same time. Didn't that mean that this person did not go through the 1st to the 8th level of elemental meridians, but directly reached the 9th level? In Nie Tian's eyes, this was simply impossible. Nie Tian, don't doubt my words. 9 elemental meridians awakened at the same time. This is the greatest characteristic of a 9 elements unite as one martial artist. Fat Cat laughed, appearing very proud, and said, "I also didn't expect that a 9 elements unite as one martial artist actually exists." Fat, what's the difference between a 9 elements unite as one martial artist and a normal martial artist? After a while, Nie Tian became a little cold and couldn't help but ask, "Of course there's a difference." Fat Cat smiled in surprise and said, "A 9 elements unite as one martial artist after the 9 elemental meridians awaken will gradually merge into one and form a 9 elements meridian. This 9 elements meridian has 9 attributes at the same time." This, Nie Tian was taken aback, and his expression froze again. 9 elements meridian, 9 attributes. This statement was too shocking, and Nie Tian couldn't accept it. Nie Tian had seen many dual attribute martial artists, and even 5 elements martial artists, but a 9 elements martial artist was something he had never thought of. Nie Yuro was a dual attribute martial artist, and her strength far surpassed other martial artists of the same level. Mizuhara Xiang was a 5 elements martial artist, and her battle strength could be said to be abnormal, which was why she was known as the #1 genius of the 9 ancient clans. And now, Lin Shun actually had a 9 elements martial artist. How could this not shock Nie Tian? Once a 9 elements martial artist grew up, it was hard to imagine how terrifying it would be. No wonder Fat Cat was so surprised when she found out that Lin Shun was a 9 elements 1 martial artist. "Fatty, I think Lin Chin's Yuan meridians should have been awakened for a long time, but he still hasn't reached the origin spirit stage. What's going on?" Next, Nie Tian took a deep breath, and his shocked expression eased up a lot. When the Fat Cat heard Nie Tian's question, her tone turned serious as she said, "Observe the little fellow's 9 elemental meridians carefully." Nie Tian furrowed his brows. He activated the holographic divine runes and used his divine sense to sense Lin Chin's 9 elemental meridians. He immediately discovered that something was wrong. Lin Chin's 9 elemental meridians were actually enveloped by some sort of powerful seal. It's the 9 Yuan divine seal. The Fat Cat's voice rang out, saying, "This is a powerful seal that comes naturally with the 9 elemental meridians. If this seal cannot be broken, the martial practitioner who fuses the 9 elemental meridians into one will forever remain in the elemental meridians realm, unable to awaken their origin spirit." This, Nie Tian was stunned and didn't know what to say. Martial practitioners who fused the 9 elemental meridians into one were naturally talented and heaven-defying. However, the 9 Yuan divine seal that came with it was obviously not an ordinary seal, and greatly restricted martial practitioners who fused the 9 elemental meridians into one. I estimate that this little fellow's 9 elemental meridians have already been awakened for more than 2 years. If he still can't open the 9 Yuan divine seal after a period of time, his 9 elemental meridians' potential will dry up. At that time, even if he opens the 9 Yuan divine seal again, he won't be able to awaken his origin spirit. At this time, the Fat Cat sighed and said with great regret. Nie Tian looked at Lin Shun, and his expression couldn't help but stiffen. Lin Shun was only 6 or 7 years old, and his potential was limitless. However, because he was a martial practitioner who fused the 9 elemental meridians into one, and possessed 9 elemental meridians in his body, he was said to have naturally useless meridians. It was really too much of a pity. Fat, do you know how to open the 9 yuan divine seal? After hesitating for a while, Nietian couldn't help but ask. He had many things to do now, but facing such a talented child, he really couldn't bear to ignore him. I don't know. The fat cat shook his head. He was also thinking about this question. Nietian's face darkened, and his gaze swept over Lin Shun, full of pity. Fat, is it because of his 9 yuan divine meridians that Lin Shun can sense the dragon chi? At this time, Nietian suddenly thought of this and couldn't help but ask. No. Unexpectedly, the fat cat shook his head and said with a wry smile, Nietian, take a closer look. What does this little fellow's 9 yuan divine meridians look like? Huh? Nietian was stunned for a moment. Then he used his divine sense to check, and his whole body stiffened again. Lin Chen's 9 yuan divine meridians were in the shape of a dragon. Dragon meridians. In the next moment, Nietian reacted and exclaimed in his heart. He was too shocked just now and didn't pay attention to the overall shape of the 9 yuan divine meridians. Now that he looked again, he actually discovered that the 9 yuan divine meridians were in the shape of a dragon. Without a doubt, Lin Chen's yuan divine meridians were not only 9 yuan divine meridians, but also dragon meridians. Dragon meridians. Lin Chen's yuan divine meridians are dragon meridians. Could it be that he's from the guardian family? Niet Tian exclaimed in his heart, and the way he looked at Lin Chen changed. At this moment, Lin Chen raised his head, and a pair of clear eyes stared at Niet Tian and said, Brother Niet Tian, what's wrong? Do you also think that I'm a good-for-nothing? Niet Tian reacted in shock and shook his head repeatedly and said excitedly, Lin Chen, how are you a good-for-nothing? You're a genius, a super genius. Lin Chen's little face stiffened, as if he was frightened by Niet Tian. Niet Tian finally understood why Lin Chen could so keenly sense the dragon chi. It was because he had 9 yuan divine meridians, and it was dragon meridians. Big brother Niet Tian, you're the genius. At this time, Lin Chen suddenly said, Your dragon meridians are so powerful. It's the strongest dragon meridians I've ever seen. Even my big brother's dragon meridians aren't as strong as yours. When Niet Tian heard Lin Chen's words, his expression involuntarily changed, and he was even more convinced in his heart that the latter was from the Guardian family clan. Lin Chen's words revealed that there were many people who possessed dragon meridians around him. Dragon meridians were precisely the characteristics of the Guardian family clan. At this time, Niet Tian suddenly reacted. Previously, Lin Chen left and returned was probably because he discovered that he had a dragon meridians in his body. Following that, Niet Tian did not question Lin Chen too much, but asked, Lin Chen, you came to Burial Cloud Mountain Range to find your big brother. Do you know where he is? When Lin Chen heard Niet Tian ask about big brother, his little face suddenly became sad, as if he was about to cry. He said, I heard from Grandpa Patriarch that big brother and the rest went to Thousand Devil Cave. It's already been 3 months. Grandpa Patriarch told me that Big Brother and the rest won't return. The clansmen also said that Big Brother and the rest are already dead. I don't believe that Big Brother is dead. I know that Big Brother is definitely still alive. As he spoke, Lin Chen finally could not hold it in anymore and began to cry softly. He was only a 6 or 7-year-old child. The things in his heart were naturally simple. Lin Chen, don't cry. You're a boy. You can't cry so casually. Niet Tian comforted Lin Chen and said in his heart, Thousand Devil Cave. What a coincidence. According to Lin Chen, his big brother should have entered Thousand Devil Cave with the clansmen to do something. But regrettably, they did not come out of Thousand Devil Cave. Chapter 2176. Lin Chen, I'm going to the Thousand Demons Cave next as well. Let's go together. Niet Tian smiled faintly after Lin Chen had calmed down. Yes, Lin Chen nodded firmly. He really wanted to go with Niet Tian, but he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Niet Tian guessed that Lin Chen must have come out behind his clan's back. It was just too dangerous for a boy to come to the Burial Cloud Mountains alone. It could be considered fate that Nye Tian and Lin Chun had met. He would obviously help Lin Chun if he could. At the very least, Lin Chun would be much safer by his side. Afterwards, the two of them descended from the sky and landed on an empty patch of land in the mountain range. Lin Chun took out his soul pet pouch and stowed the strange bird away. Afterwards, he looked at Nye Tian happily and said, "Brother Nye Tian, let's go." Nye Tian was very curious. Just what kind of divine beast was the strange blackbird? It was actually so fast. However, after some thought, he did not ask too much. Before, Nye Tian had already engraved the entire outline of the Burial Cloud Mountains into a projection and stored it in his soul, so he was extremely familiar with the entire place. They were currently rather far away from the Thousand Demons Cave. However, because the Thousand Demons Cave was in the depths of the Burial Cloud Mountains, Nye Tian could only enter through the mountains. Nye Tian was extremely careful as he entered the mountains. He kept the divine glyph on at all times, so he could clearly sense everything within 10,000 meters. This was the first time he had come to the Burial Cloud Mountains, so he had no idea what kind of danger he would encounter. Along the way, a few cultivators would appear from time to time. They were all very powerful. Most of them were overgods, and there were even quite a few peak overgods. The Burial Cloud Mountains was one of the 10 great danger zones of the Abandoned Land. Without a certain level of strength, no one dared to come here. The people that Nye Tian and Lin Chun encountered would usually glance at them a few more times. Most of them were filled with disdain. Indeed, a peak overgod and a child of 6 or 7 had appeared in the Burial Cloud Mountains. It was rather laughable. At this time, Nye Tian suddenly realized that a lot of people were rushing forward, as if something had happened. Is there something up ahead? Nye Tian was puzzled, but after thinking about it, he decided not to go over. He prepared to immediately head for Thousand Devil Cave, not wishing to waste time in other places. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly changed. He actually felt a violent aura madly rushing towards him from behind. Nye Tian instantly reacted. A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back, and with a flicker of his silhouette, he brought Lin Chun along as he soared thousands of meters into the air. Boom! Almost at the same time that his figure moved to the side, a terrifying palm shadow landed with a loud rumble, and a huge pit with a radius of several kilometers appeared on the ground. Nye Tian's figure froze in midair as he looked at the deep pit on the ground. His face couldn't help but sink. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. Otherwise, he would have been hit by this sudden palm. A piece of trash with only the power of a sovereign, but his reaction is quite fast. In the next moment, a cold, disdainful voice rang out. Afterwards, a black-clothed figure shot out, rushing forward madly. That palm strike just now was from this black-clothed martial artist. Nye Tian frowned, and he stared at the cultivator coldly. "What are you looking at, you piece of trash?" The cultivator sensed Nye Tian's hostility, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he sneered. "A piece of trash with the power of an overgod actually dares to come to the Burial Cloud Mountains. Are you tired of living? King blocked my path just now." That palm strike of mine was just a warning. The black-clothed martial artist was extremely arrogant as he looked at Nye Tian with contempt. Obviously, he regarded the latter as a soft persimmon that could be easily crushed. Boss's reminder is really overbearing. If that silver-haired brat had reacted any slower, I'm afraid he would have died from his palm strike. At this time, another black-clothed cultivator appeared and chuckled as he spoke to the person in front of him. "A piece of trash like him won't last more than half a day in the Burial Cloud Mountains. It's his honor to die to my palm strike." The first cultivator smiled cold. The first black-clothed cultivator smiled coldly, as if he did not want to waste any more time on Nye Tian. He turned to the black-clothed man beside him and said, "Second bro, let's go. There's no need to waste time on trash." With that, the two of them turned around and prepared to leave. "Wait!" However, at this moment, a cold, murderous voice rang out. It was Nye Tian. The leader was surprised. He turned around and looked at Nye Tian. He snickered. "Brat, what do you want? Did I say you could leave?" The corner of Nye Tian's lips twitched, and his gaze was dark and cold. Sensing the coldness in Nietion's eyes, the black-clothed boss couldn't help but be taken aback. He seemed to be a little nervous, but he quickly calmed down and roared, "Brat, do you know who you're talking to? I think you're really tired of living." "Boss, I think this brat is probably an idiot. Let's just kill him." The second brother smiled cold and said coldly, "Swoosh, swoosh." Just as the two men in black finished speaking, there were suddenly two ear-piercing sounds in the air. Before the two of them realized what was going on, there was a glaring sword mark on each of their faces. Half of their faces instantly became a bloody mess. The two men in black were stunned. They looked at each other and immediately reacted. They roared at the same time, "Brat, you're courting swoosh, swoosh." However, before they could finish the word die, another two sword shadows appeared. There was another sword mark on the other side of their faces. "You." The eyes of the two men in black shook violently. The way they looked at Nietion was instantly filled with shock and fear. At this moment, the two of them no longer had the arrogance they had before. Instead, it was replaced by unconcealable fear. They had no idea how Nietion was able to leave sword marks on their faces in the blink of an eye. They were early-stage paramount gods, while Nietion was only a peak over god. However, they didn't know that their strength was not even worth mentioning in front of Nietion. If Nietion wanted to kill them, there would already be two corpses. "Let me ask you, why are you in such a hurry?" Nietion asked cold, staring at the two men in black. Although the two men were arrogant, Nietion didn't want to kill them. He just wanted to know what was going on up ahead. He had already noticed that many people were running forward, so he was a little curious about what was going on up ahead. "El Lord." The black-clothed leader now knew how powerful Nietion was. He swallowed hard and said in a trembling voice, There's an ancient divine beast in the Dragonclaw Valley up ahead. I want to go and see what's going on." "An ancient divine beast?" Nietion frowned and his eyes slightly narrowed. "El Lord." The black-clothed leader's forehead was covered in sweat. He hurriedly said, "It seems to be a Pishio." Chapter 21:77. The first thing that came to Nietion's mind when he heard the word Pishio was Bab. He had found Bab by accident in the 3,000 Lesser Worlds. Moreover, Bab had hatched from a frost snake egg, so it must have been a mutation. Bab had only been with Nietion for a short time, so Nietion had given it to Nyeyuro. Nyeyuro had not only been separated from Enai, Jiaming, and Di Shi, but she had also been separated from Bab. The Pishio was a very rare divine beast, so Nietion guessed that the Pishio in front of them might really be Bab. "Get lost." Nietion waved his hand, indicating that the two black-clad martial artists could leave. The two felt as if they had been pardoned. They wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads and turned to leave. Boom! Boom! However, at this moment, two enormous palm shadows appeared in the void, and the two black-clad martial artists didn't even have time to react before they were smashed to pieces. In the next moment, a dozen black-clad figures appeared and surrounded Nietion. Nietion frowned, and his face darkened. These black-clad martial artists were obviously coming for him. They must be hunters. He hadn't expected that they would show up as soon as he arrived at the Burial Cloud Mountains. Wasn't his speed a little too fast? Nietion's gaze swept over them, and he immediately sensed that they were all late-stage paramount gods, and their auras were very strong. Clearly, they were stronger than ordinary late-stage paramount gods. Big Brother Nietion. Lin Shen looked up at Nietion, and he couldn't help but feel nervous. "Lin Shen, hide in here." Nietion took out the 9 extremities and told Lin Shen to hide in it. It was going to be a fierce battle, and Lin Shen was in great danger. Lin Shen nodded and stepped into the 9 extremities. "Kill." The black-clothed cultivators did not waste any time speaking nonsense. They only shouted the word "kill" in a deep voice. After that, more than 10 of them attacked at the same time. A surging aura appeared like a raging wave, pressing down on Nietion. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. Without any hesitation, he activated the 3 forbidden techniques. His aura skyrocketed, and a sword aura soared into the sky. He was like a giant sword that stood between the heavens and the earth. This was the first time he had used the three forbidden techniques at the same time after reaching peak over God. His presence immediately reached its peak, and his strength skyrocketed as well. To his disappointment, he was still a late paramount god. In the past, Nyetian had been a late lord god, but with his three forbidden magics, he was now as strong as a late paramount god. Unfortunately, he was a peak godlord, and even with his three forbidden magics, he was still a late paramount god. It seemed that the further one progressed, the more limited the improvement of the three forbidden techniques became. Even still, Nyetian could sense that his energy was much stronger than before. Most importantly, his Tao of the Sword had reached the level of the elementary level, and his battle prowess was now many times stronger than before. Ruinable. The power of the sword soared into the sky and suddenly bloomed. It actually forcibly broke through the huge power in the surroundings, and a violent roar sounded in the void. Streams of power wreaked havoc in the air, causing heaven and earth to tremble violently. The trees and rocks on the ground were crushed by the power, transforming into turbid waves that surged out in all directions. Damnation! Facing more than a dozen late paramount gods at the same time put a lot of pressure on Nyetian. It was as if there was an enormous hand in the air that was slowly clenching and trying to crush him. He was single-handedly fighting more than a dozen late paramount gods at the same time. It was like he was fighting more than a dozen late paramount gods at the same time. It was a very disadvantageous situation for him. 12 heaven-slaying swords formation, activate. In the next moment, Nyetian's expression darkened, and the sword intent around him skyrocketed. 12 heaven-reaching sword pillars appeared, and in the blink of an eye, they merged into one, morphing into an enormous sword projection that blossomed in the air. Boom, boom, boom. As the sword image bloomed, the power of the sword image surged out, and the dozen or so black garb cultivators were powerless to withstand it. Upon seeing this, Nyetian flapped his wings and shot up into the sky. Dying. In the void below, a black-clothed martial artist reacted very quickly. His body moved like lightning, and a black saber appeared in his hand. He slashed out tyrannically, and a flaming saber wave whistled out, spreading in the air into a sea of raging flames that surged towards Nyetian. You're courting death. Nyetian's mouth twitched, and his expression darkened. He stabbed out with the starry heaven slash, his sword will condensing into a sword image that looked like a waterfall of light, burning with terrifying flames. Boom! The moment the sword image descended, the raging flames in the air collapsed, and the black garb cultivator was swallowed up by the sword will. Not even his bones were left behind. Nyetian had used the power of the primal chaos flames in this attack, so the black garb cultivator couldn't fight back at all. After killing one person with a swing of his sword, Nyetian blurred into action and flew off into the distance. What he feared the most was a dozen or so people teaming up to attack him, so he used the advantage of space to separate them. Go to hell. Another black-garbed cultivator appeared, golden energy surging out of his body, forming a huge golden body around him. He punched out, and the surrounding space shook. Nyetian smiled coldly. He did not even look at the black-clothed cultivator as he stabbed out with his sword. The sword intent was sharp to the extreme, and the golden fist shadow instantly collapsed. A terrifying sword light bloomed and engulfed the black-clothed cultivator. When the other martial artists in black saw this, their bodies froze. They hadn't expected Nyetian to be so strong that he could kill one of them with a single sword strike. They were all late-stage paramount gods, and yet they couldn't fight back against Nyetian's sword. Nyetian's battle prowess was freakish. If you want to die, then come at me. Nyetian looked at these black-clothed martial artists and growled in a deep voice. His eyes were surging with an extremely strong fighting spirit and killing intent. Die! The black-garbed cultivators weren't afraid at all. They roared and charged forward. Boom! 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 High up in the sky, more than a dozen streaks of raging power appeared and charged madly towards Nyetian like enormous, barbaric beasts. Since you're not afraid of death, I'll fulfill your wish." Upon seeing this, Nietion's eyes grew cold. In the next moment, boundless star power surged around him, forming a star soul armor around him. In the next moment, he looked like a giant made of starlight. Boundless starlight flickered in the air, dazzling and beautiful, but containing the most terrifying killing intent. Starflow devours the heavens die. Nietion's star power surged to the limit. He roared, and the starflow heavenly slash drew a perfect arc in the air. Suddenly, a sword image appeared, wild and mighty, terrifying to the extreme. Boom! The sword image fell from the sky, turning into endless sword waves that surged in the air. When the dozen black-clothed cultivators saw this, their eyes were filled with shock. Chapter 2178. Rumble. As the sword's shadow descended, a violent sound rang out in the air. Bang! 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 More than a dozen black-clothed figures were instantly submerged by the sword shadow. With a muffled sound, they were sent flying and smashed into the ground like giant rocks. Nietion had defeated more than a dozen late-stage paramount gods with a single sword strike. His battle prowess was unimaginable. With a cold glance, Nietion moved and left. These black-clothed martial artists were knocked to the ground by him. Even if they didn't die, they would be seriously injured. He didn't want to waste time on them, so he chose to leave. High up in the sky, Nietion moved like lightning toward the Dragonclaw Valley. He originally wanted to go directly to the Thousand Demons Cave, but the two black-clothed martial artists told him that a Paishio had appeared in the Dragonclaw Valley. He suspected that the Paishio might be Bab, so he went to take a look. The Dragonclaw Valley wasn't far. After a while, Nietion landed outside a narrow valley, ready to enter. The valley in front of him was the Dragonclaw Valley. At this moment, many martial artists had gathered outside the Dragonclaw Valley, but most of them didn't enter. Instead, they chose to watch from the outside. Nietion looked at the Dragonclaw Valley, but he didn't rush in. Instead, he carefully sensed the aura in the surrounding space. Restriction. He immediately sensed that the Dragonclaw Valley was covered by a huge restriction, and there was a strong aura of restriction runes in the air. Before he came to the Burial Cloud Mountains, he had heard from Zhuozhua that the Burial Cloud Mountains was a battlefield in the era of the sages, and there were killing formations everywhere. Fat, is the restriction in the Dragonclaw Valley okay? Nietion asked cautiously to Fat Cat. Don't worry, it's just an ordinary restriction, used to suppress martial artist strength. Fat Cat's voice sounded, and it said, it can suppress martial artists above the late-stage paramount gods, but it won't affect you at all. Good. Nietion nodded. Without any hesitation, he blurred into action and entered the valley. The moment he entered the valley, Nietion immediately sensed a strong smell of blood, causing him to frown involuntarily. Nietion raised his head and saw many corpses lying on the ground. He frowned slightly, but he didn't care too much about it and rushed forward. The Dragonclaw Valley was much larger than he had imagined, and it was filled with boulders and cliffs like a maze. Following the Dragonclaw Valley, Nietion soon arrived at a narrow entrance. On both sides of the valley were mountain cliffs that were tens of thousands of zhang tall. They stood straight like giant swords. The Paishio should be inside, Nietion muttered with a smile and prepared to enter. Scram! However, at this moment, a furious roar came from inside. Then, a cultivator in green and a cultivator in gray appeared and stopped him. Nietion's eyebrows furrowed as he looked at the two of them with a strange expression on his face. I want to go in. The cultivator in green looked at Nietion with disdain and said cold, the Paishio inside belongs to our wind sect. No one is allowed to enter. Bullshit. The Paishio belongs to our blue dragon sect. The cultivator in gray glared at the cultivator in green and shouted angrily, you're the one talking nonsense. In order to catch this Paishio, our wind sect lost hundreds of disciples. The Paishio belongs to our wind sect. The cultivator in green roared and his aura surged. It seemed like he was about to attack. Do you think that only your divine wind sect people died? Our blue dragon sect also lost hundreds of people. The cultivator in gray glared at the other party. Upon hearing their words, Nietion immediately came to a realization. It seemed that the Pai Xiao was indeed inside, but the Wind Sect and Blue Dragon Sect were trying to catch it. These two sects had lost many disciples in order to catch the Pai Xiao, so they were guarding the entrance and not letting anyone in. Move! Nietion couldn't be bothered to waste time on these two. His face darkened, and he said cold. The cultivator in green and the cultivator in gray were stunned when they heard Nietion and stared at him. The cultivator in green said, "Brat, don't you see so many people dead on the ground? You're just a piece of trash with the strength of an overgod. Are you looking to die? A piece of trash dares to covet an ancient divine beast like the Pai Xiao? Are you a King idiot?" The cultivator in gray was even angrier. Cold, killing intent flashed in his eyes. In order to catch the Pai Xiao, the Wind Sect and Blue Dragon Sect had lost many people, and they were all overgod martial artists. Under these circumstances, the two sects obviously didn't want the Pai Xiao to fall into the hands of others. Therefore, they sent disciples to guard the entrance and not let anyone in. Moreover, Nietion, an overgod martial artist, wanted to go in and catch the Pai Xiao. He was basically looking to die. "Get the hell out of here!" Nietion bellowed as an incomparably fierce, frosty sword aura arose from his body. The cultivator in green and the cultivator in gray felt the terrifying power in the sword aura. Their eyes trembled at the same time, and they looked at each other in disbelief. Nietion didn't pay any attention to them as he strode forward. The two immediately reacted and wanted to stop Nietion, but it was too late. They didn't chase after him because they thought that even if Nietion went in, he would be going to die. Nietion moved very quickly. After a few flashes, he arrived in empty space. Roar! At this moment, he suddenly heard a vigorous roar in the distance. It sounded like a dragon's roar, but it had a sorrowful aura. "It's in front." His eyes trembled, and he rushed forward. He flashed past a huge mountain cliff and saw hundreds of martial artists appear in front of him. "It's here." Afterwards, Nietion sensed an extremely vigorous aura. His eyes could not help but tremble. He shot into the air and landed on a huge rock beside a cliff. He lowered his head and looked down. His eyes narrowed when he saw what he saw. On the ground, a huge beast that was hundreds of meters long lay there. Its huge body was riddled with scars and glaring bloody wounds. Its entire body was dyed red with blood. Huge, black chains wrapped around the beast's limbs and body. The chains gave off a powerful aura of inscriptions, as if they were some kind of powerful seal. The huge beast panted, and its eyes, which were like the sun and moon, flickered with a bloody light. Its limbs struggled, trying to stand up again. Unfortunately, it had already used up all of its power. Moreover, its body was bound by the chains, so it was difficult for it to even move. Several hundred martial artists around the beast were eager to try, but they did not dare to approach it casually. Nietion's eyes suddenly narrowed. He stared at the beast's eyes and finally found a trace of familiarity. It's Xiao Guai. The next moment, Nietion was sure that the beast in front of him was Xiao Guai. Even though Xiao Guai's appearance, size, and even aura had changed a lot, the special aura in its eyes was still there. Chapter 2179. Bab. Nietion was sure that the Pai Xiao in front of him was Bab. His eyes were burning with anger. Bab was badly injured. Its body was covered with gaping wounds, and its aura was getting weaker and weaker. Nietion, calm down. Fat Cat could sense Nietion's emotions, so she warned him. Nietion took a deep breath and fixed his eyes on the ground. Of course, he knew why Fat Cat had told him to calm down. Bab was flanked by hundreds of warriors, all of them paramount gods. There were even some old men who were peak paramount gods, and their auras were incredibly powerful. Even though this place was protected by powerful restrictive spells, and peak paramount gods were under great pressure, these people couldn't be underestimated. These martial artists must be from the Wind Sect and the Blue Dragon Sect. They had lost a lot of people trying to catch Bab, so they were eager to try again. This animal is dying. Everyone from the Wind Sect, listen up. Let's kill this animal together. At this time, an old man in cyan, Robe suddenly shouted. He jumped up, and his energy surged. His robe fluttered in the air. Die! The next moment, he thrust his palm out, and a ghastly claw appeared in the air, which smashed toward Bab. Roar! Bab felt the danger, so it threw its head back and roared, but it sounded more like a wail. It was seriously injured, and its strength had been used up. Besides, it was tied up by a huge iron chain, so it couldn't fight back at all. Damn it! The sudden turn of events caused Nietion's expression to turn grim. Unable to remain calm any longer, he unfurled his wings and charged down towards the ground. Bab was already seriously injured, and it was on the verge of death. If the old man in cyan robe attacked it again, it would definitely die. Nietion spread his wings, which were more than 100 meters long, and looked like shining stars, which made him extremely fast. God-piercing sword. While he was still in the air, he had already activated the 3 forbidden techniques. His aura surged to the limit as the corner of his mouth twitched. With a low roar, he slashed down with his sword. Sword shadows poured down like a waterfall at the green-robed old man. The green-robed old man suddenly sensed that something was wrong and exclaimed in surprise. When he raised his head and saw Nietion, his expression changed. He had never imagined that someone would actually attack him at this time. The old man was a peak paramount god, and far stronger than any other warrior in the same level as him. However, Nietion's sword was too sharp. Furthermore, the green-robed elder had been caught off guard, so the latter's reaction was slightly slower. Swoosh! The moment the sword shadow fell, the green-robed old man dodged to the side, but he was still injured by the sword light. One of his arms was torn off, and blood instantly dyed half of his body red. And at this instant, Nietion's silhouette had already descended. He directly activated the astral soul shield, blocking the fatal palm strike for little Guai. What's going on? Where did this silver-haired kid come from? The crowd was stunned by the sudden turn of events, and they began to cry out in alarm. They all turned to look at Nietion. Who would have thought that someone would suddenly appear at this time? Bastard, who are you? The green-robed old man steadied himself and stared at Nietion with bloodshot eyes, as if he wanted to skin Nietion alive. After a while, the people of the Wind God sect came to their senses and looked at the green-robed old man in astonishment. Elder Sun. The green-robed old man's name was Sun Zhangxi, and he was an elder of the Wind God sect. He had a high status in the sect. The people of the Wind God sect were very surprised that Nietion had directly cut off one of Sun Zhangxi's arms. If Sun Zhangxi's reaction had been a bit slower, he would have died. How could Nietion be so strong? At this time, Nietion didn't care about the others at all. He landed next to Xiao Guai and looked into its eyes. Xiao Guai. When Xiao Guai saw Nietion, it was very angry at first. However, when it sensed Nietion's aura, its huge pupils shrank, and tears of blood flowed out of its eyes. Xiao Guai, don't worry. I will take you away from here. Nietion's heart skipped a beat, and he nodded firmly. Since he had met Xiao Guai here, of course, he would take it away. However, this was not easy. The Wind God sect and the Blue Dragon sect were eyeing Nietion covetously, and they obviously wouldn't let him leave easily. When Sun Zhangxi heard Nietion's words, he shouted angrily and stared at Nietion coldly. This kid wants to take the Pai Show away. Kill him. Kill him. The other martial artists roared at the same time. Immediately, many of them attacked Nietion in a frenzy. Go to hell. Nietion let out a bellow as his purple heaven lightning battle armor lit up and enveloped little Guai. Then he flapped his wings and shot up into the sky, wreathed in raging sword intent. What these people had done to Xiao Guai made Nietion very angry. He was going to kill them all today. Nietion's sword essence was surging, and at the same time, it was accompanied by his blood chi. Stimulated by the blood chi, the power of his sword essence was increased several times, and then the sword's sealing forbidden array was opened. Bang! 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 The sword was like an ocean, surging in the air. The rolling waves spread out in all directions. Many warriors couldn't withstand the impact of the sword will and were directly sent flying. Seeing Nietian's fearlessness, some of the more powerful martial artists couldn't help but pause and take the initiative to retreat. How could this kid be so strong? The people of the Wind sect and the Blue Dragon sect looked at Nietian with trembling eyes. They were deeply shocked by Nietian's strength. The Wind sect and the Blue Dragon sect were top sects in the land of the abandoned. Although their comprehensive strength couldn't compare with top forces like the Dark Moon Holy Sect and the Inwa dynasty, they were definitely very powerful. Now, the hundreds of disciples of the two sects were actually very afraid of a young martial artist. This was a rare scene. Elder Peng, this kid's strength is strange and unpredictable. Why don't we join hands and kill him first? At this time, the elder of the Wind sect, Sun Zhangqi, looked at an elder in a gray robe and said in a deep voice. Peng Song, the elder of the Blue Dragon sect, looked at Sun Zhangqi and nodded. I accept Elder Sun's suggestion. We have lost hundreds of disciples to catch this Pai Xiao, and this kid wants to take it away. Isn't he looking down on us? If we don't kill this kid today, how can the Blue Dragon sect and the Wind sect establish a foothold in the land of the abandoned in the future? Then, Peng Song's eyes turned cold. He glanced at the disciples of the Blue Dragon sect and said loudly, Disciples of the Blue Dragon sect, listen up. Kill this silver-haired kid at all costs. Seeing this, Sun Zhangqi nodded and said loudly, Disciples of the Wind sect, listen up. Whoever can kill this silver-haired martial artist, I guarantee that he will be promoted to our sect's core disciple. Yes, yes. Chapter 2180. Nietian sensed the strong, killing intent in the space, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he was calm and serious. Since the Wind sect and the Blue Dragon sect had joined hands, Nietian would fight with them to his heart's content. Let's attack together and kill him. At this time, someone in the crowd shouted angrily. Hundreds of martial artists moved at the same time. Their chi power combined and turned into endless pressure, which shrouded Nietian. God-sealing sword formation, world-devouring sword dragon. Seeing this, Nietian was not afraid at all. He shouted angrily. The sword essence and blood chi around him became violent, and the horrible power of the formation was flowing in the void. Boom! In the next moment, he lashed out with his sword. The power of the formation and the power of the sword will instantly condensed and fused together. A sword dragon that was thousands of meters long appeared. Its whole body was burning with the terrifying power of flames. It tumbled into the sky. Rumble! The sword dragon roared, and its momentum was surging. A horrible sound came from a void, and the horrible power was raging in the space. At this moment, Nietian's figure suddenly sank down. With a flap of the wings on his back, he dived down. He stabbed the star's heavenly slash in his hand crazily. A strand of sword essence rushed out and turned into several sharp sword shadows in the air, rushing toward Bab. Bang! 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 The moment the sword shadow fell, the iron chains around Bab were directly cut off in a flash of fire. Bab, come in! Nietian was shocked. 9 superbs appeared in his hand. Then, a space-time light appeared and covered the huge body of the Pai Xiao. Growl! Bab roared in a low voice. It used all its strength to move its body and disappeared in the void. Seeing Bab had entered the 9 superbs, Nietian let out a long sigh of relief. Oh no, that Pai Xiao is gone. At this time, someone saw the scene below and cried out in alarm, shouting loudly. The others immediately looked over. The ground was empty, leaving only a dripping bloodstain, but there was no trace of the Pai Xiao. How is that possible? Everyone was shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes. A giant beast that was hundreds of meters long had disappeared in thin air, just like that. This kid has a space-time treasure on him. Azure Dragon sect Elder Peng Song could be considered to have seen the world. He immediately understood and shouted, Everyone, don't be nervous. The Pai Xiao is on him. As long as we kill him, we will definitely be able to find the Pai Xiao. The people of the two sects finally reacted. Their gazes toward Nietian were filled with even more intense killing intent. Go to hell. In the next moment, A cultivator in green robes roared and attacked from a tricky angle, trying to sneak an attack on Nietian. You think you can kill me? Nietian's reaction was extremely fast. With a cold roar, he didn't even look at that person and directly stabbed with his sword. A scream came from the air, and that person's figure was instantly submerged by the sword. This guy is so terrifying. When the others saw this, they were once again afraid of Nietian's strength. They couldn't understand how Nietian could easily crush a cultivator of the same level as him when he was clearly only a late-stage paramount god. However, they didn't know that Nietian's true cultivation was only a peak overgod. If they knew that the person who crushed them was only an overgod, they would probably have a different expression. Are you afraid now? Nietian saw everyone's reaction. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he growled, "If you know fear, then get the hell out of my way." With that, the wings on his back suddenly unfurled, and the space in the air tightened. His figure was like a bolt of lightning as he shot straight toward the dozens of cultivators. Sword Hearts in Moon. He slashed out, and the surging sword intent in the air condensed into a huge sword that shot out. The sword images were like dragons, opening a path in the air and forcing dozens of cultivators to retreat. A few cultivators could not dodge in time and were sent flying. While they were still in the air, they exploded and turned into clumps of scarlet light that dissipated. When the others saw Nietian's valiance, they all instinctively retreated. Now's my chance. Nietian smiled when he saw this, and the wings on his back flapped as he shot into the air. A bunch of trash. Peng Song roared when he saw this, and he cursed, "This kid wants to escape. Stop him." His figure suddenly moved, and an extremely violent power formed around him. It actually condensed into an illusory dragon that charged straight at Nietian. Roar! As Peng Song let out a furious roar, the azure dragon shadow around him seemed to have sensed his aura. It opened its mouth and let out a dragon roar. Immediately afterwards, it unleashed a terrifying amount of azure dragon power, which condensed into a streak of violent energy that shot towards Peng Song like a sharp arrow. Blue Dragon Roar. The disciples of the Blue Dragon sect exclaimed in unison when they saw this scene. The martial skill that Peng Song was using was one of the 3 sect-guarding martial skills of the Blue Dragon sect, Blue Dragon Roar. Nietian frowned when he felt a violent force coming at him from behind. His face suddenly turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, "Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, the 9 dragon veins in his body began to circulate wildly. Waves of violent dragon chi were released, and a sea of crimson lightning appeared behind him. An enormous dragon shadow emerged from the sea of lightning. "Reckless fool, I'll let you see what a real dragon roar is." Nietian spun around and fixed his eyes on Peng Song. The huge crimson dragon rolled out from behind him. As it moved, the space around it trembled, and its dragon might shook heaven and earth. Roar! The next moment, the crimson dragon roared at the sky, and a powerful dragon chi spread out. A terrifying force exploded in the sky and rushed down. Boom, boom, boom. Following this, a deafening explosion could be heard as a terrifying force slammed onto Peng Song's body, shattering the illusionary azure dragon around him. Bang! Then, under the watchful eyes of countless people, Peng Song's body was sent flying, and he fell to the ground, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Lord Elder. At this moment, a disciple of the Blue Dragon sect reacted and rushed out to catch Peng Song at the most critical moment. The disciple retreated a few hundred meters and finally stabilized himself. He looked at Peng Song and asked in surprise, "Lord Elder, are you all right?" At this time, the people from the Blue Dragon sect and the Divine Wind sect all looked over. They saw that Peng Song was covered in blood, but his aura was still stable. He had managed to preserve his life. Luckily, the disciple of the Blue Dragon sect caught Peng Song in time. Otherwise, Peng Song would have been dead for sure. Chapter 2181. Seeing that Peng Song was coughing up blood again, the crowd finally realized how seriously injured he was. They all sucked in a breath of cold air and were speechless. Yet Tion's battle prowess was simply too shocking and beyond their imagination. Elder Sun Zhangqi of the Divine Wind sect had one of his arms cut off by Tion. Elder Peng Song of the Blue Dragon sect had been seriously injured by Tion and had almost died. Both of them were elders in their respective sections. They were people with extremely high statuses in their sections. But now, in front of Tion, they were as weak as sheep. Everyone knew that even under the suppression of the restrictive spell, Sun Zhangqi and Peng Song's strength was comparable to that of a peak paramount god. But in front of Tion, they didn't even have the right to stand. Didn't that mean that Tion's strength was far greater than theirs? Sun Zhangqi saw that Peng Song was seriously injured, but the corner of his mouth curved into a smile, as if he was glad that his injuries were light. Only now did he realize how lucky he was. If he hadn't dodged that sword attack, he would have died without a doubt. Anyone else wants to kill me? Tion's gaze swept across the crowd as he bellowed in an arrogant and domineering manner. Hundreds of martial artists fell silent. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Tion was too terrifying. He was someone they couldn't afford to offend. These people were a bit stupid. If they attacked together, even Tion wouldn't be able to escape. Umph, a bunch of cowards. Tianling sneered and prepared to leave. You think you're so strong after injuring an elder of the Blue Dragon sect? However, at this moment, a low and deep voice suddenly resounded in the sky. Soon after, a frightening force descended. It agglomerated into a dragon claw in the sky and violently smashed downwards. Tion couldn't help but frown when he sensed the terrifying force. He immediately used his sword energy to meet the dragon claw. Boom! In the next moment, two extremely powerful forces collided with each other. Space shook violently, and the surrounding mountains and cliffs trembled as if they were about to collapse. Tion felt the force pressing down on him, forcing his body to sink. He flapped his wings with all his might and stabilized his body. He looked up into the sky and saw a black-robed old man standing there with a pair of cold eyes staring at him. Great Elder. When the people of the Blue Dragon sect saw the black-clothed old man's face, they cried out in unison and shouted out his identity. Peng Song's eyes also trembled and instantly became pleasantly surprised. He did not expect that the Great Elder would personally appear. The old man in black was none other than the Blue Dragon sect's Grand Elder, Lu Jinyuan. This person's aura is far stronger than the other two elders. Tion's divine sense swept over, and Lu Jinyuan's aura shocked him. He guessed that Lu Jinyuan's strength should be similar to Xian Zongfeng's. Kid, you're not bad. You can actually block this elder's Azure Dragon hand. At this time, Lu Jinyuan's eyes darkened slightly, and he actually smiled and said, "This elder will give you a chance to live now. As long as you are willing to join the Blue Dragon sect and take me as your master, I will spare your life." How about it? What? The Grand Elder wants to take this kid as his disciple? When the disciples of the Blue Dragon sect heard Lu Jinyuan's words, they all exclaimed and looked at Tion in disbelief. Who would have thought that not only did Lu Jinyuan not kill Tion, he also wanted to take him as his disciple. In the Blue Dragon sect, Lu Jinyuan's status and strength were second only to the Supreme Elders and the Sect Master. Countless disciples of the Blue Dragon sect wanted to take Lu Jinyuan as their master. But now, such a good thing had actually fallen into Tion's hands. How could they be willing? But thinking about it carefully, it was not surprising. After all, Tion's talent was too strong. He even blocked Lu Jinyuan's Azure Dragon Hand. Azure Dragon Hand. This was one of the three major martial arts of the Blue Dragon sect. One could imagine how powerful it was when it was used by Lu Jinyuan. However, Tion had withstood the attack head-on. How terrifying. Grand Elder this. Peng Song was dazed for a moment, and he looked embarrassed. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by Lu Jinyuan. Kid, I am the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect, Lu Jinyuan. Lu Jinyuan saw a strange smile on the corner of Tion's mouth and thought that the latter was hesitating. So he said, "In the Blue Dragon sect, There are countless people who want to take me as their master. As long as you join the Blue Dragon sect and take me as your master, what you just did will be written off, and you will also be trained by the Blue Dragon sect. What do you think? On the surface, Lu Jinyuan wanted to take Nye Tian as his disciple, but secretly, he had another plan. The palm just now showed him that Nye Tian's talent could be called monstrous. However, what he was interested in at the moment was not Nye Tian's talent, but the latter's dragon vein. Lu Jinyuan didn't expect that he would actually meet someone who had a dragon vein. As long as he obtained Nye Tian's dragon vein, his Azure Dragon Hand would definitely be able to advance to the next level, and his strength would even have a qualitative leap. At this moment, Nye Tian was looking at Lu Jinyuan. The corners of his mouth curled up into a strange smile. His eyes were filled with a very playful look. For others, being able to enter the Blue Dragon sect and be a disciple of Lu Jinyuan was definitely a great thing. But in the eyes of Nye Tian, this was completely not worth mentioning. In fact, it was a kind of insult to him. After entering the land of the abandoned, Nye Tian had seen many freakishly powerful experts. The Dark Azura deity, the Moon Emperor, 3 legendary swordsmen, and a mysterious person with unfathomable strength. Any one of these people could easily crush Lu Jinyuan. A mere peak paramount god wanting to take Nye Tian as a disciple was simply a joke. Moreover, Nye Tian felt that he didn't need a master at all. He didn't like to cultivate step by step. He liked to constantly challenge and improve his strength. If he really needed a master, he would definitely find someone as strong as the mysterious person. At the very least, there was still Ming Jianyu. No matter what, trash like Lu Jinyuan wouldn't have a chance. More importantly, Nye Tian could tell that Lu Jinyuan didn't want to take him as a disciple, but rather wanted something from him. Lu Jinyuan's eyes were filled with passion and greed. This wasn't the look of someone who wanted to take a disciple. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Nye Tian, waiting for his answer. Lu Jinyuan, you want to take me as a disciple, right? At that moment, Nye Tian finally opened his mouth. A disdainful smile hung at the corner of his mouth as he said, "Unfortunately, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve it." Nye Tian's voice wasn't loud, but each word was like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at Nye Tian in disbelief. They hadn't expected that Nye Tian would refuse Lu Jinyuan's request to take him as a disciple. Under these circumstances, wasn't Nye Tian courting death by refusing? When Lu Jinyuan heard Nye Tian's words, his face darkened and his eyes turned bloodshot. Chapter 2182. Brat, what did you just say? Say it one more time. Suddenly, Lu Jinyuan roared furiously, and a sinister voice rolled out from his throat. He was clearly enraged to the extreme, and even his body was trembling slightly. He had taken the initiative to accept Nye Tian as his disciple in front of so many people and promised Nye Tian that he would give him the best cultivation resources. But in the end, he was told that he wasn't worthy. One could imagine the anger in his heart. He was the first elder of the Blue Dragon sect. When had he ever been humiliated like this? Therefore, he could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. I said, "You're not worthy." Facing the enraged Lu Jinyuan, Nye Tian sneered. His voice was clearer and louder than before. Lu Jinyuan's face turned red, as if he had been slapped a few times. His eyes darkened, and he roared, "Little bastard, you're asking for it." Amidst the violent roar, Lu Jinyuan's aura suddenly surged. His figure moved, and a shadow of a blue dragon appeared around his body. He was like a wild beast that had gone berserk as he pounced at Nye Tian. What a terrifying aura! Everyone's expression changed as they exclaimed in shock. They knew that Lu Jinyuan was really furious this time. Good timing. Facing Lu Jinyuan's violent attack, Nye Tian's lips twitched, and the murderous intent and battle intent in his eyes surged at the same time. Since Lu Jinyuan wanted to fight, Nye Tian would fight with him. Boom! In an instant, Nye Tian's dragon chi rose again, and the giant scarlet golden dragon appeared. A terrifying aura spread in the void, causing the surrounding space to tremble. When the others saw this, their eyes trembled. They were not shocked by Nietion's aura, but his courage. No one had expected that Nietion would dare to fight Lu Jinyuan head-on under such circumstances. Little bastard, go to hell. Lu Jinyuan hovered in midair, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. As long as he killed Nietion, he could also obtain the latter's dragon vein. Roar! Nietion was not afraid at all. With a thought, the crimson golden dragon roared and pounced straight at Lu Jinyuan. The crimson gold dragon's body was more than 3,000 meters long. As it rolled through the void, it appeared to be boundlessly huge. The huge dragon's body surged with the terrifying power of thunder, and at the same time, it was also burning with a terrifying and strange flame. This time, Nietion used the chaos flames to unleash the full power of the dragon vein. Courting death, Lu Jinyuan let out a low roar, and the azure dragon image around him suddenly expanded several times in size. He refused to believe that a peak paramount god like himself wouldn't be able to defeat Nietion. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, the two giant dragons rapidly approached each other and finally collided. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a frightening explosion sounded out as the entire space started to tremble. Waves of violent energy burst out in all directions. The crowd felt the terrifying power and retreated. Boom! Bang! 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 Waves of violent energy bombarded the surrounding cliffs of the mountains, and the tens of thousands of meters tall mountain cracked under the bombardment. It swayed in the air as if it was about to collapse. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Ear-piercing sounds rang out in the air as the bodies of the two giant dragons tore at each other, trying to destroy the other completely. The crowd looked at the scene in front of them with blank expressions, unable to believe what they were seeing. At this moment, they finally realized how terrifying Nietion's strength was. Boom! Crack, crack, crack! At this moment, an explosive sound rang out, followed by terrifying tearing sounds. The eyes of the crowd trembled. They saw that in the air, that illusory figure of the azure dragon was actually being torn apart. Waves of terrifying energy were directly collapsing in the space. Kill! At this moment, Nietion's angry roar rang out in the air, and the chaos flames on the crimson dragon's body suddenly became violent. Puff! Boom! Then, a line of fire whizzed out and directly spread in the air into a sea of fire, enveloping the space where Lu Jinyuan was. At this moment, there was no azure dragon image around Lu Jinyuan's body. He felt the hot air rushing towards him, causing his face to turn pale and his expression to stiffen. No, don't kill me. The next moment, Lu Jinyuan felt the real aura of death, and he actually cried out in pain. However, it was too late. The violent sea of fire engulfed Lu Jinyuan's figure in an instant. The sudden scene caused everyone's pupils to constrict and their nerves to tense up to the extreme. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would believe that the dignified first elder of the Blue Dragon sect had died just like that? Everyone's expression was extremely shocked, as if even their breathing had stopped, and they could only stare blankly at the void space. The flames and dragon chi in the sky lasted for a long time before dissipating. The space gradually became clear, and a silver-haired figure appeared in the sky. It was Nietion. However, Lu Jinyuan's figure had disappeared forever. In a direct confrontation, Lu Jinyuan had died miserably. Perhaps even until his death, he didn't understand how Nietion could defeat him. At this moment, Nietion had a faint smile on his face, and his expression was extremely calm. Although killing Lu Jinyuan was very difficult, it was still within his expectations. Lu Jinyuan was originally suppressed by the restriction in the Dragon Claw Valley, so he couldn't use his full strength. On the other hand, the power of Nietion's dragon vein had a strong suppressive effect on the power of the Azure Dragon. Under such circumstances, Nietion used the chaotic flames to activate the power of the dragon vein to the extreme and finally killed Lu Jinyuan. Under normal circumstances, if Lu Jinyuan's strength wasn't suppressed, Nietion wouldn't have any chance of winning. You want to take me as your disciple with only this kind of strength? What a joke. Yet Tianling sneered, then swept his gaze across the crowd below and didn't say anything else. His figure moved, and he directly left. The two elders and hundreds of disciples watched as Tian left. They didn't even dare to move, let alone chase after him. When Tian's figure disappeared, these people finally moved, but their eyes were still filled with shock. Leave. The two elders, Sun Zhangqi and Peng Song, finally reacted and quickly left with their respective sect disciples. They had to immediately return to the sect and inform the upper echelons of what had happened here. The Divine Wind sect and Blue Dragon sect had lost hundreds of people to capture the Pai Xiao. Now, the Pai Xiao was taken away, and the Blue Dragon sect's first elder was killed. They definitely wouldn't let this matter go. After Tian left the Dragon Claw Valley, he sprinted for a long time and only slowed down after making sure that no one was chasing after him. Tian, your dragon vein is seriously injured. I'm afraid it will take a few days for it to recover. Don't use the power of the dragon vein for now. At that moment, the fat cat's voice could be heard, and it reminded Tian. Tian nodded. He obviously knew that the dragon vein was injured. Lu Jinyuan's strength was terrifying, and Tian had paid a great price to kill him. Luckily, the people of the Divine Wind sect and Blue Dragon sect didn't notice that Tian was injured. Otherwise, it would not be easy for him to escape. Next, Tian found a hidden valley and took out the 9 extremities. Chapter 2183. In a valley, Tian took a deep breath and activated the holographic divine patterns. After making sure there was no one around, he opened the 9 superbs. In a flash of space-time light, Bab appeared, along with a young man. It was none other than Lin Shun. What? Tian took a few steps back. When he saw Bab, he was surprised. How did you recover so fast? Bab's aura was still weak at the moment, but there were fewer wounds on its body. Most of the wounds had turned into scars, and only the deep ones were bleeding. Tian knew that Pishio was a direct descendant of the Divine Dragon, and its recovery ability was very strong. However, he didn't believe that Bab's recovery ability could be so strong. Roar! Roar! At this moment, Bab seemed to have sensed Tian's confusion. It stuck its head over and rubbed Tian a few times, but its huge eyes were fixed on Lin Shun. Tian touched Bab's head, then turned around to look at Lin Shun. To his surprise, Lin Shun's face was as pale as a piece of paper, and his breath was much weaker. Lin Shun, what's going on? Tian asked with a puzzled look on his face. Brother Tian, Bab is your friend, right? I saw that it was badly injured, so I treated it, Lin Shun said with a faint smile. Looking at Tian, he was quite proud. It's you. Tian's expression flickered with astonishment as he asked, did you help little Guai recover from its injuries? Yes. Lin Shun smiled. He was happy to be able to help Tian. Well, Tian was struck dumb. Lin Shun, how did you do that? He knew that Lil Guai was seriously injured. It was on its last gasp, and its life was in danger. He had planned to stabilize Bab's condition with the power of the source of the earth, and then let Bab recover on its own. But now, Xiao Guai was fine, except that its breath was still a little weak. Lin Shun was only a child of 6 or 7 years old. His origin spirit had not even awakened yet. How could he help a Pishio recover from its injuries in an instant? This was simply too strange. Use my blood. Lin Shun smiled proudly. He suddenly raised his arm and showed his wrist to Tian. Your blood. Tian frowned. He immediately noticed that there were traces of blood on Lin Shun's wrist, as well as 2 small teeth marks. All of a sudden, he realized that Lin Shun had used his own blood to heal Bab's injury. No wonder Lin Shun's face was so pale. Tian understood and couldn't help but feel warm in his heart. Looking at Lin Shun, he solemnly nodded and said, Lin Shun, thank you. Brother Tian, we are friends. Friends should help each other. Lin Shun giggled, her bright eyes flickered, and she said sneakily, I think Big Brother Tian will help me find my brother, right? Tian saw the cunning look in Lin Shun's eyes. He smiled and nodded. Don't worry, I will definitely help you find your brother. Although this Lin Shun was young, his mind was very nimble. He knew that he was too weak to find his brother, so he wanted Nye Tian to help. But he was too embarrassed to say it out loud, so he put in some effort on Bab. Nye Tian could tell that Lin Shun was a smart and innocent child. Since Lin Shun had helped him heal Bab, he would definitely help Bab find its brother. In fact, Nye Tian didn't need Lin Shun to say it out loud. He had already made up his mind to not leave Bab alone. "Thank you, Brother Nye Tian." Lin Shun smiled happily. He was so excited that he was about to jump up and down. Nye Tian looked at Lin Shun, but he was thinking about something. He didn't expect Lin Chen's blood to be so powerful. It almost instantly healed Bab's injury. Lin Shun was a 9-elemental combination martial artist. The 9 elemental meridians in his body were dragon meridians. It was not surprising that his blood had special powers. But this kind of power was a little too powerful. It was really terrifying. Nye Tian had a feeling that even his own bloodline might not be as powerful as this. Nye Tian, the reason why this brat's blood is so powerful is not only because of his 9 origins meridians and dragon meridians. There are even greater secrets hidden within his body. At this moment, little fat cat sighed inwardly with a bitter smile on its face. In fact, he had discovered a bigger secret in Lin Shun. But he didn't tell this secret to Nye Tian. "Lin Shun, how do you know Bab's name?" Suddenly, Nye Tian thought of something and asked in surprise. Earlier, Lin Shun had called out Bab's name, but Nye Tian remembered that he didn't tell Lin Shun the name. How did Lin Shun know? "I can understand what Bab is saying." Lin Shun smiled proudly. Suddenly, he jumped to Bab's side and raised his hands to grab a strand of Bab's fur. Bab lowered its head and looked very docile. Nye Tian was speechless. He didn't know what to say for a long time. Lin Shun could understand what Bab was saying. That was beyond Nye Tian's expectation. "Big brother Nye Tian, I'll tell you a secret. Actually, there's something very terrifying inside of me." Lin Chen's eyes suddenly flickered as he said to Nye Tian in a very serious tone. "Scary thing? What is it?" Nye Tian was dazed for a second and couldn't help but ask. "I don't know." Lin Shun shook his head and said nervously, "Grandpa said that the thing inside my body is the hope of our people. If anything happens to me, our family will face a great disaster." Nye Tian looked at Lin Shun and couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't know what to say. Lin Chen's words gave him a faint, uneasy premonition. There were more and more secrets in Lin Chen's body, which made him more and more unfathomable. "Lin Shun, how long have you been away from the family?" Nye Tian suddenly thought of this question and asked with a frown. According to Lin Shun, he was very important to his family. So, if he suddenly left the family, it would definitely cause panic in his family. "Many days." Lin Chen's little face was twisted. He said worriedly, "If Grandpa finds out that I am not here, he will be worried." Nye Tian smiled bitterly and patted Lin Chen's shoulder. "Lin Shun, don't worry. I will help you find your brother as soon as possible and then send you home." "Thank you, Brother Nye Tian." Lin Shun raised his head and his eyes were shining like gems. Nye Tian nodded and then let Xiao Guai enter the 9 superbs. Since Xiao Guai's injury had been stabilized, there was nothing to worry about. He just needed to let it rest in the 9 superbs. When Xiao Guai's injury was completely healed, it could help Nye Tian at a critical moment. "Lin Shun, let's go. We are going to the 1,000 Demons Cave." Nye Tian didn't care about his injury and was ready to go to the 1,000 Demons Cave immediately. "Yes." Lin Shun nodded heavily, unable to hide the excitement in his heart. Nye Tian smiled and suddenly thought of something. He couldn't help but ask, "Lin Shun, what is your brother's name? Why is he going to the 1,000 Demons Cave?" Lin Shun nodded and said unhurriedly, "My brother is called Lin Yi. He is going to the 1,000 Demons Cave with his family to look for something." "Look for what?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. Chapter 2184. "Lin Shun, what did you say?" When Nye Tian heard Lin Chen's words, his eyes suddenly trembled and he anxiously asked. He had clearly heard Lin Chen mention the dragon spring vein. This made him somewhat uncertain, so he asked again. "I said, my brother and my clansmen seem to have gone to the 1,000 Demons Cave to find something called the dragon spring vein." Lin Shan repeated himself. When he raised his head, he saw that Nietian's expression had stiffened. He couldn't help asking, "Big brother Nietian, what's wrong?" Nietian was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. He shook his head and said, "I'm fine." He really didn't expect that Lin Chen's brother and clansman would actually go to the Thousand Demons Cave to find the Dragon Spring Vein. Previously, Nietian had already guessed that Lin Chen might be from the Protector clan. Now, he was absolutely certain that Lin Chen was from the Protector clan. Originally, there were very few people who knew about the Dragon Spring Vein, and those who knew where it was hidden were even rarer. Huadong had told Nietian that other than the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring, there were 5 Spirit Dragon King rings. Each of these 5 Spirit Dragon King rings contained a hidden dragon map that recorded the location of the Dragon Spring Vein. Lin Chen's clansmen knew that the Dragon Spring Vein was hidden in the Thousand Demons Cave. Clearly, they had the Spirit Dragon King rings. After guessing all this, Nietian took a deep breath and slightly calmed his excited heart. He didn't ask Lin Chen too much because he felt that a 6- or 7-year-old child wouldn't know too much. But he was already certain that the Thousand Demons Cave not only contained the space-time crystal essence he was looking for, but also a Dragon Spring Vein. But to find the location of the Dragon Spring Vein, he first had to find Lin Chen's brother, Lin Yi. According to Lin Chen, Lin Yi and the others had already entered the Thousand Demons Cave several months ago. Even Lin Chen's clansmen believed that Lin Yi and the others were already dead. Right now, Nietian couldn't confirm whether Lin Yi was still alive or not. All the truth would only be known after entering the Thousand Demons Cave. Nietian brought Lin Chen along. Their speed was not fast as they slowly moved towards the Thousand Devils Cave. Nietian discovered that there were quite a few people who wanted to enter the Thousand Devils Cave. As they got closer and closer to the Thousand Devils Cave, the number of people surrounding them also increased. Most of the people were in groups, ranging from a few dozen to 7 or 8 people. There was only one family like Nietian and Lin Chen, who only had 2 people. When the others saw Nietian and Lin Chen, their faces were filled with doubt. They could not hide the disdain in their eyes. Nietian didn't pay any attention to them and headed directly towards the Thousand Demons Cave. The friend in front, "Please wait a moment." At this time, a clear voice suddenly sounded behind Nietian and Lin Chen. It was very melodious, like a wind chime, giving people a feeling of spring breeze. Nietian's body froze. He turned around and saw a girl in purple slowly walking towards them. This girl looked very young, around 20 years old. Her actual age should not be that old either. Her facial features were exquisite, beautiful, and exquisite. Her face was filled with a sincere smile, giving people a very comfortable feeling. However, behind her, there were 7 or 8 young men following. Their faces were gloomy, and they seemed very unfriendly. "Miss, what can I do for you?" Nietian looked at the girl in purple and asked with a faint smile. "My friend, my name is Ouyang Yufei. May I ask how I should address you?" The girl in purple had a pair of clear eyes, as she said, very enthusiastically, "My name is Lin Chen. He is big brother Nietian," Lin Chen said without waiting for Nietian to speak. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. Although Ouyang Yufei was very enthusiastic, he was still very cautious. "Miss Yufei, what can I do for you?" Nietian asked with a faint smile as he took a step forward. "May I ask if you're going to the Thousand Demons Cave?" Ouyang Yufei's gentle lips curled up as she asked. Nietian nodded. He could not help but look at the people behind Ouyang Yufei. "Big brother Nietian, we're also going to the Thousand Demons Cave. Why don't we go together?" Ouyang Yufei said sincerely with a sweet smile. "Junior sister, what are you saying?" Just as Ouyang Yufei finished speaking, a young man walked out from behind her. He seemed very dissatisfied as he looked cold at Nietian and Lin Chen. "Senior brotherling, want to invite big brother Nietian and the others to go with us," Ouyang Yufei said to Ling Yusong with a faint smile. "Go with them." Ling Yusong's eyes flickered. Her gaze swept over Nietian and Lin Chen with extreme disdain. Her attitude was very arrogant. However, due to Ouyang Yufei's presence, Ling Yusong did not say much. She only said cold, "Junior sister, We're going to the Thousand Demons Cave this time to complete the mission given to us by the sect. We cannot bring other people. Senior brother Ling, but the two of them. Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes flickered. She still wanted to say something, but she was directly interrupted by Ling Yusong. Junior sister, I am the person in charge of this mission. If I say I won't bring them, then I won't. Ling Yusong forcefully interrupted Ouyang Yufei. Her eyes were extremely cold and filled with disdain. At this time, Nie Tian smiled faintly and said to Ouyang Yufei, Miss Yufei, we appreciate your good intentions. Since your senior brother does not welcome us, then there is no need to force it. After speaking, Nie Tian directly turned around and prepared to leave. Of course, he could see what was going on in front of him. He just did not want to continue being entangled. Ouyang Yufei had good intentions. She saw that Nie Tian and Lin Shan were very weak, so she wanted them to join her team and provide protection for the two of them. However, Ling Yusong clearly did not want two weak people to join, so she coldly refused. Actually, speaking of which, Ling Yusong did not do anything wrong. After all, no one wanted their team to be weak. Big brother Nie Tian, I feel that you too shouldn't enter the Thousand Demons Cave. That place is too dangerous for you. At this time, Ouyang Yufei's voice rang out. She looked at Nie Tian and still wanted to say something, but she hesitated and did not say it. Don't worry, nothing will happen to us. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His expression was extremely calm. At this time, Ling Yusong laughed coldly, as if she could not help it anymore. She coldly said, a piece of trash with the strength of a main god and a child who is still wet behind the ears. You want to enter the Thousand Demons Cave with such a lineup? You're simply looking to die. You two idiots, what do you think the Thousand Demons Cave is? A market? No divine formation master, no sealing master, nothing. I'm afraid you won't even be able to find the entrance to the Thousand Demons Cave. As she spoke, Ling Yusong pulled Ouyang Yufei up and said, Junior sister, let's go. There is no need to waste time on these two idiots. Wait. Just as Ling Yusong was about to leave with Ouyang Yufei, Nie Tian's voice rang out. What? Are you not convinced? Ling Yusong's figure froze. She turned back to look at Nie Tian, her eyes cold and contemptuous. Chapter 2185. Nie Tian's voice was low, and his eyes were filled with uncontrollable rage. Big brother Nie Tian, that's not what senior brother Ling meant, is it? Ouyang Yufei could tell that Nie Tian was really angry, so she hurriedly explained. At the same time, she looked nervously at Ling Yusong, as if she was worried that he would do something rash. He knows very well what he meant. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up slightly. You're a genius. You can look down on me, but you can't insult me. So what if I insult you? Ling Yusong's eyes darkened, and his expression turned cold. I, Ling Yusong, am one of the three geniuses of the Wind God sect. I'm already a late paramount god. And you're just a nameless nobody. You're only a peak over god. With my, Ling Yusong's identity and strength, being willing to insult you is already thinking highly of you. As the cold voice fell, Ling Yusong's attitude became even more arrogant. His eyes flickered with a cold light, appearing extremely sinister. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he heard Ling Yusong's words, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He hadn't expected Ling Yusong to be from the Wind God sect. He had just come into contact with the Wind God sect, and he had even severed the arm of one of their elders, Sun Zhangqi. Now, a disciple of the Wind God sect was acting so arrogantly in front of him. He couldn't help but find it laughable. Oh, what are you laughing at, you brat? Ling Yusong asked coldly when he saw the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitch. He could clearly sense the deep contempt in Nie Tian's smile. An over-god martial artist was looking down on him, a supreme god martial artist. This was practically challenging the limits of his tolerance. In truth, he had long since wanted to make a move against Nie Tian. It was only because Ouyang Yufei was present that he had been suppressing himself. If Nie Tian really didn't know what was good for him, he wouldn't mind teaching him a lesson. I'm laughing because you're ridiculous, Nie Tian said coldly, raising his eyebrows. I'm ridiculous? I'm laughable. Ling Yusong's eyes narrowed, immediately revealing killing intent. He growled, "Stinking brat, you're courting death." He had tolerated it for a long time. How could he tolerate Nie Tianling's provocation? Boom! Ling Yusong took a step forward, and the aura around her rose. A huge pressure directly enveloped Nie Tian. Senior brother Ling, don't. Ouyang Yufei cried out in alarm when she saw this. She didn't expect that Ling Yusong would still make a move. In her opinion, Nie Tian was only a peak over god. It was impossible for him to be Ling Yusong's opponent. What was even more troublesome was that Nie Tian had Lin Shun by his side, a child who was only 6 or 7 years old. At this moment, the eyes of the other people also trembled, but their eyes were extremely burning, as if they could see the scene of Nie Tian directly being crushed. However, in the next moment, an extremely strange scene occurred. Bang! In the void, a muffled sound rang out, and then a figure flew out several hundred meters, smashing heavily into a huge tree that was several meters thick, forcefully breaking the tree in half. Everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they all looked at the huge tree that had been smashed, shocked on the spot. Right beside the huge tree that had been broken, a figure stood trembling. His entire body was dripping with blood, and his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. This person was none other than Ling Yusong. The disciples of the Divine Wind sect finally reacted after watching for a long time, and they cried out in shock, Senior Brother Ling." They never thought that Ling Yusong would actually be directly sent flying, and he was even heavily injured. What happened just now? What was going on? Suddenly, Ling Yusong spoke, looking at Nie Tian in shock, his expression extremely terrified. "You, how can your aura be so strong?" In that instant just now, the two of them had clashed with their auras, and the result was very obvious. Nie Tian's aura crushed Ling Yusong. Ling Yusong couldn't imagine that a peak over god martial artist's aura would actually be so powerful. "You're a genius?" Nie Tianling looked coldly at Ling Yusong, the corner of his mouth raised into an undisguised, mocking smile, and he said, "Unfortunately, a genius like you is even inferior to a trash like me. Tell me, don't you think you're ridiculous?" Ling Yusong opened his mouth to say something, but he felt a tightness in his chest, and a mouthful of dirty blood sprayed out. He was completely in a mess now, and he didn't know what to say. He was indeed a genius of the Divine Wind sect, but this genius was completely crushed in front of Nie Tian. "Big brother Nie Tian." At this time, Ouyang Yufei was also shocked. She looked at him with a shocked face and didn't know what to say. Originally, she was worried that Nie Tian would be injured by Ling Yusong. Now it seemed that she was worried about the wrong person. The person she really needed to worry about was Ling Yusong. "Miss Yufei, thank you for your kindness just now. We'll take our leave." Nie Tian smiled at Ouyang Yufei, then left with Lin Shun. With his strength, the instant the 3 great forbidden techniques were activated, he could directly kill Ling Yusong with the pressure of his aura. However, he didn't do so, which could be considered as giving Ouyang Yufei face. However, Ling Yusong had gone all out just now, and the look in his eyes was clearly that he wanted to kill Nie Tian. Nie Tian didn't want to compete with an idiot, so he directly left. Ouyang Yufei and the other disciples of the Divine Wind sect looked at the backs of Nie Tian and Lin Shun. They were all stunned for a long time and only reacted after a long time. Until now, they still felt as if they were in a dream, and they didn't dare to believe the scene just now. However, Ling Yusong had indeed been injured. This was not fake. Ling Yusong reacted and stared at Nie Tian viciously as he roared in his heart, "Brat, let's wait and see." Following that, he sat cross-legged and began to slowly recover his strength. At the same time that Ling Yusong recovered his strength, the figures of Nie Tian and Lin Shun had already arrived outside a dense forest less than a kilometer away from the Thousand Demons Cave. Lin Shun was a little tired from walking, and he raised his head to look at Nie Tian and asked, "Big brother Nie Tian, we're almost at the Thousand Demons Cave, right?" "Yes." Nie Tian nodded and said, "After passing through this dense forest, we'll be able to see the entrance to the Thousand Demons Cave. That's great, Lin Shun shouted in surprise, and then he excitedly ran forward, wanting to enter the dense forest. Lin Shun, come back. Seeing this, Tian's eyes trembled, and he directly reached out and pulled Lin Shun back. Buzz! However, right at this moment, a strange sound suddenly rang out from a void. Immediately after, a black streak of light appeared, whistling fiercely. Like a ferocious beast, it directly pounced towards Tian and Lin Shun. Lightning Purple Heaven Battle Armor, activate! In an instant, Tian reacted extremely quickly, and his entire body lit up with a layer of purple light, forming the lightning battle armor outside his body. Chapter 2186. Tian and Lin Shen's figures streaked across the sky before landing steadily. That was close. Tian steadied himself and saw that there was a crack on the lightning purple heaven battle armor. He could not help but suck in a breath of cold air as he spoke, still in a state of shock. That moment just now was too dangerous. If Tian's reaction had been a little slower, that black light would not have struck the lightning purple heaven battle armor, but his and Lin Shen's bodies. Tian's martial body was strong. Even if he was hit by the black light, he would at most be injured. There would not be any danger to his life. But Lin Shun was only a child who had not even awakened his origin spirit. If he was hit by the black light, he would die without a doubt. Big brother Tian, what just happened? Lin Shen's little face was incomparably shocked. It was obvious that he was not lightly frightened. He raised his head and asked Tian. It's a killing formation. Tian looked at the dense forest in front of him and said solemnly. When he had just arrived, he could already see that there was a very powerful killing formation hidden in this dense forest. However, before he had time to speak, Lin Shun rushed over. The killing formation in this dense forest was more powerful and sensitive than Tian had expected. Just now, Lin Shun was still a few dozen meters away from the dense forest when he directly triggered the killing formation. It was really dangerous. Killing formation? Lin Shen's eyes trembled. He appeared to be both surprised and puzzled. He asked, what is it? Is it powerful? Very powerful. Tian shook his head with a smile and did not explain too much. After all, Lin Shun was only a 7-year-old child. It was normal that he did not know what an array formation was. At this time, Tian finally understood why Ling Yusong would say that without a divine array master and a sealing master, Tian could not even find the entrance to the Thousand Demons Cave. Outside the Thousand Demons Cave, there were all kinds of killing formations. Without a divine array master and a sealing master following them, ordinary martial artists would not be able to avoid these killing formations. Almost everyone who entered the Thousand Demons Cave appeared in a team. In a team, there must be a divine array master and a sealing master. Moreover, there must be at least 2 of them, with one as a backup. Tian wasn't unfamiliar with formations and restrictions, but he also didn't have much attainment in them. Thus, it was impossible for him to enter the Thousand Demons Cave on his own. Fortunately, he was accompanied by a fellow who was a grandmaster of both arrays and seals, Fat Cat. Tian, give me some time. I will provide you with the safest route. At this moment, there was no need for Tian to speak. Fat Cat's voice rang out, chuckling and speaking confidently. The Burial Cloud Mountain Range was the battlefield of the Sage era. Hence, the killing arrays here were all extremely powerful. However, because too much time had passed, these killing formations had become much weaker. Thus, it was very easy to find a gap in them. Of course, Tian believed in Fat Cat's strength. Thus, he wasn't anxious and waited quietly at the side. At this moment, many people in the surroundings had already slowly entered the dense forest. Most of the teams were able to pass through smoothly. However, there were some teams who took the wrong path in the dense forest and triggered the killing arrays, resulting in a tragic death. The Thousand Demons Cave is indeed a dangerous place, Tian mumbled as he looked at the dense forest in front of him. This dense forest wasn't very big, but it was unknown how many cultivators had died in it. Tian, it's done. After a while, Fat Cat's voice rang out again. Following this, a light map appeared in Nietion's spiritual sense. It was the diagram of the entire formation in the dense forest. What was even more bizarre was that Fat Cat had used different colors to label the entire formation diagram, making it look very beautiful. Fat, I only need one route. Do you really need to deconstruct the entire formation? Nietion laughed. No wonder Fat Cat took so much time. Yes, I need it very much. Fat Cat laughed strangely and said, Nietion, haven't you noticed? There's a group of people behind you. They've been standing there for a long time. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, but his expression didn't change much. He said, I've noticed them for a long time. Is there a problem? At this moment, there was a group of cultivators behind Nietion. It seemed to be a team of about 30 to 40 people. These people stood in the same place for a long time without moving. Of course, Nietion noticed them. However, these people didn't do anything and seemed very calm, so he didn't pay much attention to them. Nietion, do you think these people are here to enjoy the scenery? Fat Cat laughed, a strange look in her eyes. Nietion's expression flickered. He sent out his divine sense and found that these people were all late paramount gods. Little fatty, are you saying that these people are here to kill me? Nietion couldn't help but become cautious upon this discovery, and he asked with a frown, if they're not here to kill you, then are they here to visit you? Fat Cat laughed strangely. If they're here to kill me, then why aren't they attacking? The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched. He was a bit puzzled, but then he realized what was going on. They're waiting for the right moment. You're not that stupid after all. Fat Cat laughed. They're waiting for you to enter the killing formation. Then they'll make their move. Yeah. Nietion nodded. He understood now. Earlier, he had run into a group of pursuers. Unfortunately, not only had they failed to kill Nietion, but Nietion had killed many of them instead. Therefore, these pursuers had become much smarter. After finding Nietion, they didn't make a move. Instead, they waited for Nietion to enter the killing formation. They wanted to kill Nietion with the help of the killing spell formation in the dense forest. Nietion had been careless and hadn't noticed their plot. Fortunately, Fat Cat had been there, or he would have been in trouble. Little Fat Cat was very smart. It had drawn out the entire formation diagram of the forest, just so that when Nietion entered the killing formation, he would have more routes to choose from. If you want to play, then I'll play with you. Nietion looked at the people behind him, his mouth curling into a cold smile. To ensure Lin Chen's safety, Nietion asked him to enter the Superb's 9. Lin Chen was happy to do so, because he had discovered that there were many precious items in the Superb's 9, including Bab and a golden centipede. Nietion, it's all up to you now. Fat Cat chuckled. She was very confident in Nietion. Nietion agreed. After taking a deep breath, he no longer hesitated and stepped into the dense forest's killing formation. At that moment, the dozens of cultivators behind him exchanged glances, then walked over and followed Nietion into the dense forest killing formation. Dozens of martial artists entered the killing formation at the same time, but none of them triggered the killing formation. It was obvious that there were divine array masters among them, and they were very familiar with the killing formation. The game has only just begun. Nietion walked through the killing formation. His speed was not fast. Instead, he walked step by step. Chapter 2187. Suddenly, a figure charged toward Nietion from within the killing formation. In the blink of an eye, he was less than 10 meters away from Nietion. Whoosh! The man's eyes darkened, and without saying a word, he thrust his sword forward. However, his sword was not aimed at Nietion, but at an area in the void. Nietion's eyes narrowed. He could clearly see with his divine sense that the sword was pointing at a dangerous area marked with red light on the diagram of the formation. Clearly, this man was very familiar with the formation and wanted to borrow the power of the killing formation to kill Nietion. Unfortunately, Nietion had the diagram of the formation in his divine sense, so he knew more about the killing formation than his opponent. In the next moment, Nietion's figure flickered, and he dodged it nimbly. Just as he dodged, a beam of black light flashed past. If he had been any slower, he would have been hit by the black light. The black light from the killing formation didn't look very powerful, but it was powerful enough to kill a peak paramount god in an instant. Eh. That person couldn't help but exclaim in surprise when he saw that Nyetian had dodged the black light of the killing formation. But then he stabbed out with his sword again. The sword split in two in the air, blasting in two different directions. His eyes flickered with cold, killing intent. He was very confident, as if he could already see the scene of Nyetian being cut in half by the black light. In his opinion, Nyetian had been lucky to dodge it just now. But this time, two killing formations had been triggered, and there was no way Nyetian could dodge them. Nyetian's lips curled into a smile, and he retreated half a meter to the side, deftly dodging the two beams of black light. How is this possible? The man couldn't hold it in any longer. He let out a strange cry, clearly very surprised. He hadn't expected Nyetian to be able to dodge two killing formations at the same time. If it had been a coincidence the first time, then it definitely wasn't a coincidence this time. It was obvious that Nyetian knew the killing formation like the back of his hand. Be careful, everyone. This kid is very familiar with killing formations. The man's eyes flickered, and he immediately shouted a warning to his companions. You are right. I am very familiar with killing formations. Nyetian looked at the man, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He chuckled and said, I really want to know how much you know about killing formations. As soon as he finished speaking, Nyetian stabbed out with his sword. 3 rays of sword light whistled out at the same time, bombarding 3 different places. You? The man was struck dumb for a second, but soon realized what was going on. He screamed and retreated. However, at that moment, 3 rays of black light suddenly appeared in the void and attacked that person from different directions. The 3 streaks of black light came from different directions, from tricky angles, and were extremely fast. Even though that person was very familiar with killing formations, he did not have any chance to dodge the 3 black lights at the same time. At the critical moment, the man's toes tapped lightly, and his figure rose about 2 meters, avoiding the black light on his left and right. However, the black light above his head descended at this moment, directly splitting him in half. In the blink of an eye, blood gushed out. The scene was bloody. When the others saw this, their eyes trembled, as if they could not believe it. In the next moment, great fear appeared in their eyes. Only now did they realize that after entering the killing formation, it was not Nyetian who had fallen into their trap, but they had fallen into Nyetian's trap. Are you very afraid? Nyetian's gaze swept across everyone, and the corners of his mouth curled up coldly. He said in a deep voice, Since you have come to me voluntarily, I will not show mercy. His voice was not loud, but it was extremely gloomy. The group of martial artists felt the murderous intent in Nyetian's eyes at the same time, and instantly felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. It's time to end this. At that moment, Nyetian smiled faintly and stabbed out with his starry sky slash. Instantly, hundreds of rays of sword light appeared, like dancing snakes, rushing towards the void. Nyetian's mastery of sword intent had reached an extreme level. Next, each ray of sword light would trigger a black ray of killing formation. Run! In the next moment, someone reacted, and with a scream, he instantly retreated. Unfortunately, he was still one step too late. Swish! 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 In the blink of an eye, hundreds of rays of black light shot out from the killing formation, radiating the aura of a grim reaper as they attacked the dozens of martial artists. The dozens of late-stage paramount gods didn't even have time to react, and were instantly killed. The air was filled with a very strong smell of blood. The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched slightly, but there was no mercy in his eyes. Instead, he laughed. 30-some late-stage paramount gods. If they had killed me directly, they would have had a very good chance. Indeed, if those 30 people had attacked Nyetian at the same time, they would have had a chance to kill Nyetian. Unfortunately, they had been too stupid to wait for Nyetian to enter the killing formation before making a move. Instead, they had become little sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Of course, Nyetian didn't feel sorry for their deaths. They had come to kill Niet Tian, and if Niet Tian had shown them mercy, it would have been cruel to himself. In a world where the martial Tao reigned supreme, killing had never been a rare thing. Niet Tian had his own principles. He wouldn't take the initiative to kill people, but if someone tried to kill him, he wouldn't show mercy. Everyone else who saw what was happening in the killing formation was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. That was when Niet Tian saw a group of familiar faces standing outside the forest. It was Ouyang Yufei and the others. Clearly, Ouyang Yufei had seen everything that had just happened and was staring at Niet Tian in shock, especially Ling Yusong, whose eyes were as wide as saucers. If her eyes had been a little bigger, her eyeballs would have popped out of her head. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed what they were seeing. Niet Tian had killed dozens of late paramount gods in the blink of an eye. That was too terrifying. All of a sudden, Ling Yusong felt that she was like a little lamb, and Niet Tian was a vicious wolf. Not long ago, he had been a little sheep who had recklessly provoked a vicious wolf. Only now did he realize that if Niet Tian had really wanted to kill him, even if he had 100 lives, he would still be a corpse by now. Just now, Ling Yusong had been thinking about revenge. But now, even if he had 10,000 gallbladders, he wouldn't even think about revenge. Compared to Niet Tian's current methods, that clash of auras just now was simply too merciful. Niet Tian hesitated for a moment, but then called out, "Miss Yufei, let's go together." Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes flickered, and she stared blankly for a few seconds. She hadn't expected that Niet Tian would take the initiative to call out to her. And just now, Ling Yusong had insulted Niet Tian. Ouyang Yufei couldn't help but look at Ling Yusong, who was nodding her head like a rattledrum. She completely agreed to go with Niet Tian. Yes, yes. Ouyang Yufei hurriedly nodded in agreement. Chapter 2188. Niet Tian's figure came to Ouyang Yufei and the others. He smiled faintly and said, "Miss Yufei, you can just follow behind me and follow my path." Ouyang Yufei nodded. Her beautiful eyes flickered. She seemed very nervous. She really didn't expect Niet Tian to be so powerful. The killing array was like nothing in front of him. Niet Tian Ui. At this time, Ling Yusong hesitated for a long time and finally spoke. "Why can I walk so fast in the killing array?" Before Ling Yusong could finish, Niet Tian interrupted her and said with a faint smile, "Who told you that I don't have a divine array master or a sealing master by my side?" This. Ling Yusong was stunned and couldn't speak for a moment. She clearly saw that there was only Lin Chun beside Niet Tian, and Lin Chun was only a 6 or 7-year-old child. Obviously, he couldn't be a divine array master or a sealing master. Then, there was only one possibility. Niet Tian himself was both a divine array master and a sealing master. And looking at Niet Tian's familiarity with the killing array, he was obviously not a rookie array master, but a grandmaster array master. But how old was Niet Tian? Thinking of this, Ling Yusong was shocked to the extreme. His mouth was wide open, but he couldn't make a sound. Niet Tian saw what Ling Yusong was thinking and didn't explain. Instead, he smiled faintly at Ouyang Yufei and said, "Miss Yufei, follow me closely." "Big brother Niet Tian, I will follow you closely." Ouyang Yufei nodded her head and spoke in a voice that was as low as a mosquito's. Her pretty face was inexplicably flushed red. Niet Tian didn't pay too much attention. His figure moved and stepped into the dense killing array, deliberately slowing down. Ouyang Yufei followed closely behind Niet Tian. She was careful and didn't dare to be careless. After a moment, Niet Tian and the others finally passed through the killing array. "I finally made it." Ouyang Yufei pat her chest. Her chest was heaving up and down, and her forehead was covered in cold sweat. For Niet Tian, the dense forest killing array was not worth mentioning, but Ouyang Yufei was very careful as she walked, afraid that she would make a mistake. Ling Yusong and the others were also overjoyed. Although they did not say anything, their faces revealed gratitude. If not for Niet Tian, they would have been able to pass through the killing array, but it would definitely not have been so easy, and there might have been an accident. "Is this the Thousand Demons Cave?" At this moment, Nietian looked ahead and frowned. His expression was very ugly. In front of him was a huge mountain that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was tens of thousands of meters tall. Countless caves could be seen on the surface of the mountain. They looked like monsters with their mouths wide open, intent on devouring everything. When Ouyang Yufei saw Nietian's ugly expression, she could not help but take a step forward and ask softly, "Big brother Nietian, this is your first time coming to the Thousand Demons Cave, right?" "Yes." Nietian nodded. He did not expect the Thousand Demons Cave to be so magnificent. There were at least 8,000 caves of all sizes, if not 10,000. No wonder it was called the Thousand Demons Cave. There were so many caves, but Nietian could not see any difference at all. It was as if there was no difference in any cave he entered. He was here to find the space-time crystal element. If he entered every cave once, it would probably take dozens of years. He did not have so much time to waste. "Miss Yufei, are you familiar with the Thousand Demons Cave?" Nietian frowned, glanced at Ouyang Yufei, and asked. Ouyang Yufei seemed a little embarrassed. She shook her head, looked at Ling Yusong, and said, "I have never been to the Thousand Demons Cave, but senior brother Ling has been here many times. He is very familiar with the Thousand Demons Cave." Cough, cough. When Ling Yusong heard Ouyang Yufei's words, she actually coughed twice, as if waiting for Nietian to speak. Nietian smiled faintly, not feeling embarrassed at all. He asked directly, "Brother Ling, since you are very familiar with the Thousand Demons Cave, then I'll have to trouble you to tell me about it." Ling Yusong was stunned. She did not expect Nietian to be so polite. She immediately put on a flattered expression and said quickly, "I have been to the Thousand Demons Cave 3 times. I am very familiar with it. The mountain range in front of us is called the Thousand Demons Mountain. The entire mountain is enveloped by a large array. According to rumors, these caves are the eyes of the array. In the entire Thousand Demon Mountain, there are a total of 8,612 caves. Each and every cave possesses an extremely mysterious restriction. All the cultivators that enter the caves will be restricted by the restrictions." As she spoke, Ling Yusong walked forward and pointed at the Thousand Demons Mountain. She said, "Brother Nye, look. When all these caves are connected, don't they look like huge rings?" Nietian looked around and nodded with a smile. When all the caves were connected, they formed huge rings. When all the rings were connected, they looked like layers of halos, faintly emitting a strange light. The Thousand Demons Mountain was enveloped by a large array. It was not strange that these caves could emit such an aura. Ling Yusong laughed, seemingly very pleased with herself. She continued, "These cave eyes are divided into a total of 9 rings. The closer the cave is to the outer ring, the weaker the restrictions. The closer the cave is to the center of the ring, the stronger the restrictions. For countless years, many genius cultivators have wanted to enter the Thousand Demons Cave to see what exactly is inside. However, the vast majority of the people who entered the Thousand Demons Cave died inside. Only an extremely small portion of people came out alive, but they did not bring anything out." Speaking up to this point, Ling Yusong paused for a while, seeming somewhat sad. This was because her elder brother had died in one of the caves of the Thousand Demons Cave. Since the Thousand Demons Cave is so dangerous, why are there still so many people wanting to enter? Nietian asked with a puzzled expression, frowning slightly. Because the Thousand Demons Cave is a huge treasure trove. In every cave, there are natural treasures. Ling Yusong forced a smile. Then he pointed to the outer ring of caves and said, "These outermost caves have already been ransacked by people. There's nothing left. However, very few people can enter the inner ring of caves, so there are definitely good things inside." Nietian smiled faintly and suddenly asked, "What layer of caves do you want to enter by coming to the Thousand Demons Cave?" Ling Yusong's gaze flickered, and he smiled awkwardly. He said, "We are carrying out a sect mission. We only need to enter the outermost first layer of caves." The first layer of caves was the outermost cave. The restrictions were the weakest, and the danger was the lowest. Actually, The 3 times Ling Yusong came to the Thousand Demons Cave, he had entered the first layer of caves. It was just that he was embarrassed to say it. The first layer of caves is not dangerous, but the second layer of caves is very dangerous. As for the third layer of caves, very few people can enter it. Following that, Ling Yusong said, those who can enter the fourth layer of caves are existences that are as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. As for the fifth layer of caves, basically only the peak geniuses of the Forsaken Land have the opportunity to enter it. As for the sixth layer of caves, in the entire history of the Forsaken Land, not many people have entered it. So terrifying. When Nie Tian heard Ling Yusong's words, his gaze involuntarily sank. He did not expect the Thousand Demons Cave's restrictions to be so strong. Chapter 2189. Hearing what Ling Yusong said, Nie Tian's expression couldn't help but become much more serious. He really didn't think that a small Thousand Demons Cave would be so strange. The Thousand Demons Cave had more than 8,000 caves, divided into 9 layers. The first layer's cave restrictions were the weakest, and the 9th layer's cave restrictions were the strongest. But according to Ling Yusong, it seemed that those who could enter the 6th layer were already world-shocking existences, and in the entire history of the Forsaken Land, there were only a few. Didn't that mean that no one had entered the 7th layer to the 9th layer before? Nie Tian took a look. There were hundreds of caves from the 7th layer to the 9th layer added together. There were so many caves, but no one had ever entered them. No one knew what was hidden in them. At this time, Nie Tian really couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked with a faint smile, Brother Ling, I want to know if anyone has entered the 7th layer and the deeper layers before. Hearing Nie Tian's question, Ling Yusong couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, she shook her head with certainty and said, the peak geniuses of the Forsaken Land have at most entered the 6th layer. As for the 7th layer and the deeper layers, no one has ever entered before. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he asked, doesn't that mean that no one knows what's in the 7th layer and the deeper layers? Yes. Ling Yusong nodded heavily, and then she noticed that Nie Tian's gaze was a little strange. It was actually flickering with a blazing light, as if he was eager to try. Sensing this, Ling Yusong's expression couldn't help but change, and she exclaimed, Brother Nie, you can't be thinking of entering those inner layers of caves, right? Since I'm here, of course I have to give it a try. Nie Tian smiled faintly, but didn't say which layer of caves he wanted to enter. At this time, Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes flickered, and she asked with a shocked expression, Big Brother Nie Tian, you can't be thinking of entering the 2nd layer of caves, right? In her opinion, being able to come to the Thousand Demons Cave was already very amazing. Entering the 1st layer of caves meant great danger, and the 2nd layer of caves was even more dangerous. She thought that Nie Tian wanted to enter the 2nd layer of the cave. Nie Tian smiled faintly and shook his head, but he did not say anything. Upon seeing Nie Tian shake his head, Ouyang Yufei couldn't help but sigh in relief. She nodded and said, since Big Brother Nie Tian doesn't want to enter the 2nd layer, then let's go to the 1st layer. Nie Tian looked at Ouyang Yufei and said, Miss Yufei, to tell you the truth, the reason I came to the Thousand Devils Cave this time is to find something very important. Since the 1st layer of the cave has already been ransacked, I don't think there's a need to enter. When Ouyang Yufei saw Nie Tian's serious expression, she couldn't help but blush and lower her head. Brother Nie, what are you looking for? Ling Yusong suddenly asked. Space-time crystal essence. Nie Tian didn't hide it and nodded. Space-time crystal essence. Upon hearing Nie Tian's words, Ling Yusong and Ouyang Yufei exclaimed at the same time and looked at Nie Tian in disbelief. The others were also shocked, and they could not hide the fear in their eyes. Seeing everyone's reaction, Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned and asked, What's wrong with you guys? Ling Yusong was stunned for a few seconds before she reacted. She looked at Nie Tian with a solemn face and said in a heavy voice, Brother Nie, you're not joking, are you? Are you really looking for space-time crystal essence? Already? Is there a problem? Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed and he asked, Is there no space-time crystal essence in the Thousand Devils Cave? The news that there were space-time crystal essence in the Thousand Devils Cave was told in Yetian by the mysterious man, so it shouldn't be wrong. This, Ling Yusong was stunned and didn't know what to say for a while. Brother Ling, if there's something you want to say, just say it. Yetian slightly frowned and said directly. Ling Yusong let out a long breath and finally calmed down a lot. She said, Brother Nya, I really don't know how to tell you. The Thousand Devils Cave does have space-time crystal essence, but space-time crystal essence is a treasure that maintains the stability of space-time. Even the Forsaken Land, space-time crystal essence is a very precious thing. Countless people from major forces have come to the Thousand Devils Cave to look for space-time crystal essence, but they all returned in vain. Why? Hearing this, Nyetian couldn't help but frown and ask. Because the space-time crystal essence is in the 5th layer of the cave. Ling Yusong's expression became much more solemn. There are very few cultivators who can enter the 5th layer of the cave, and those who can come out alive are even fewer. Many major forces have lost countless genius disciples for the space-time crystal essence. Saying this, Ling Yusong couldn't help but look at Nyetian and sincerely said, Brother Nya, I know that your strength and talent are top-notch, but if you want to obtain the space-time crystal essence by yourself, it's impossible. At this moment, Ling Yusong's words weren't because he looked down on Nyetian, but because he really believed that Nyetian had no chance of obtaining the space-time crystal essence. It was precisely because of this reason that Ling Yusong and the others were very surprised. It was hard to imagine that Nyetian had come to the Thousand Devils Cave alone for the space-time crystal essence. It was simply too inconceivable. If you didn't already know of Nyetian's heaven-defying strength, Ling Yusong would definitely think that the former was an idiot. So that's how it is. After listening to Ling Yusong, Nyetian smiled faintly and said, It seems that I've taken this matter too lightly. Brother Nya, let me give you a word of advice. Ling Yusong nodded and said solemnly, If you really want the space-time crystal essence, you should first find a powerful force to rely on. That way, you might be able to obtain it. Thank you for your advice. Nyetian smiled faintly and said with a carefree expression, Since I'm already here, of course I have to give it a try. Maybe I'll be lucky and succeed. Big brother Nyetian, hearing that Nyetian wanted to give it a try, Ouyang Yufei's small face stiffened. She looked at Nyetian and was speechless. The space-time crystal essence was in the 5th layer of the cave. It was simply unimaginable how dangerous it was inside. If Nyetian gave it a try, he would simply be using his own life as a joke. Ouyang Yufei knew that Nyetian's strength and talent were terrifying, but the 5th layer of the cave was really not a joke. Thank you for worrying for me, but this is what I have to do. I can't give up. Nyetian looked at Ouyang Yufei and smiled faintly. His eyes were extremely firm. Ouyang Yufei still wanted to say something, but she could feel the determination in Nyetian's eyes, so she swallowed the words that were about to come out. Nyetian nodded slightly and prepared to bid farewell to Ouyang Yufei and the others and immediately try to enter the 5th layer of the cave. But at this moment, his eyes involuntarily narrowed, as if he had sensed something. Chapter 2190. Sensing a powerful aura behind him, Nyetian looked over his shoulder to see a burly middle-aged man staring at him with a pair of abstruse eyes. He pulsed with a powerful aura, making it obvious that he was a peak paramount god. From his aura, Nyetian could tell that this man's battle prowess was no weaker than the top experts of the 9 realms. However, he was far from the half-sage level. Master! Right at this moment, Ling Yusong reacted and let out a strange cry. Then, she directly knelt down in fear and trepidation. Teacher! When Nyetian heard how Ling Yusong addressed the person, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Greetings, Sect Lord, the other disciples of the Divine Wind Sect said, dropping to their knees as well. Sect Master, upon hearing this title, Nyetian was taken aback once again. Father! Right at that moment, Ouyang Yufei suddenly stepped forward and called out in a low voice. Nyetian's jaw dropped, and his expression darkened as he realized who the newcomer was. It was none other than Ling Yusong's master, the sect lord of the Divine Wind sect, and Ouyang Yufei's father, Ouyang Chuan. Following that, a few more martial artists appeared and stood behind Ouyang Chuan. Nie Tian glanced at them and saw a familiar face. It was none other than Sun Zhangqi, an elder of the Divine Wind sect. It was at this point that he realized why Ouyang Chuan had come. Ouyang Chuan was also staring at Nie Tian, looking him up and down with increasing surprise. "Father, why are you here?" Ouyang Yufei asked, sensing that Ouyang Chuan was looking at Nie Tian in a strange way. "I'm here for him," Ouyang Chuan said coolly, his mouth curling into a smile, his eyes locked onto Nie Tian. Ouyang Yufei, Ling Yusong, and the others all stared in shock, not knowing what was going on. Could it be that there was a connection between Nie Tian and the Divine Wind sect? "Sect Lord, it's him," Sun Zhangqi said, taking a step forward and glaring coldly at Nie Tian. "Our Divine Wind sect lost hundreds of disciples trying to capture the Pishio. Not only did this kid take away the Pishio, he even cut off one of my arms. Our Divine Wind sect has never suffered such humiliation in the Burial Cloud mountain range. Sect leader, please uphold justice for us and kill this brat." As he finished speaking, Sun Zhangqi's eyes were piercingly cold, and he wished for nothing more than to tear Nie Tian into pieces. "What?" Ling Yusong and Ouyang Yufei were stunned. They turned to look at Sun Zhangqi and realized that he was missing an arm. Seeing this scene, the two of them were shocked. How could they have imagined that Nie Tian had actually broken one of Sun Zhangqi's arms? Sun Zhangqi was an elder of the Godwind sect, a peak paramount god. Exactly how strong was Nie Tian's battle prowess? But at this time, Ouyang Chuan didn't care about Sun Zhangqi's anger at all. He laughed and asked, "Sun Zhangqi, are you sure you didn't get the wrong person?" "No, absolutely not. The person who broke my arm is definitely this brat." Sun Zhangqi was stunned for a moment. Then he nodded heavily and said, Nie Tian had severed his arm with a single move. How could he be mistaken? If you're not mistaken, then what's with his strength? Ouyang Chuan frowned and said cold, "You said that the person who injured you was a late paramount god, but he was only a peak over god. This?" Sun Zhangqi was taken aback. Only now did he realize that Nie Tian was only a peak over god. He stood there in a daze, a look of confusion on his face. When he had fought Nie Tian, the latter was clearly a late paramount god. How could he be a peak over god now? What was going on? Sun Zhangqi couldn't understand. A person who's only a peak over god killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect in a single strike. Should I believe that? Ouyang Chuan smiled strangely, his eyes roaming over Nie Tian, as if he were looking for something. As his voice fell, Ling Yusong, Ouyang Yufei, and the others were petrified. If they hadn't heard wrong, Ouyang Chuan said that Nie Tian had killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect with a single move. Ling Yusong and the others knew how powerful the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect was. Even if he wasn't as strong as Ouyang Chuan, he wasn't too far off. Nie Tian had killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect with a single move. That was just too ridiculous. Sect Master. At this time, Sun Zhangqi reacted and said with a trembling voice, "This brat really killed Lu Jinyuan. This is absolutely true. This subordinate saw it with his own eyes." "Is that so?" Ouyang Chuan sneered, then raised an eyebrow and said to Nie Tian, "Young man, you haven't said anything. Are you feeling guilty?" "Guilty? Why would I feel guilty?" Nie Tian smiled faintly. "I was the one who took the Pishio, cut off Elder Sun's arm, and killed the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect. I'm the one who did all these things. Do you think there's a problem?" Ouyang Chuan looked at Nie Tian and felt the calmness in the latter's eyes. He couldn't help but be shocked. This brat, he can actually remain so calm in front of me. His mind is really strong. "Brat, you said that you did all these things. Why should I believe you?" Ouyang Chuan sneered and said in a deep voice, "Do I need you to believe me?" Nie Tian laughed and asked, "Whether you believe me or not is your business. What does it have to do with me?" Ouyang Chuan frowned. He didn't expect Nie Tian to dare to talk to him in this manner. "Brat, watch your attitude. The person talking to you right now is the sect master of the Wind God sect. Sun Zhangqi roared angrily. Nie Tian glanced at him coldly and said, "Be it the sect master of the Wind God sect or a street vendor, they're all human beings. There's no difference in my eyes. Besides, I'm not from the Wind God sect. Do I need to speak in such a humble manner?" You? Sun Zhangqi's eyes trembled. He felt a tightness in his chest and couldn't say a word. Ouyang Chuan laughed and said, "Young man, you're right. We don't know each other, and there's no relationship between us. There's no need for you to be so respectful in front of me. However, I hate liars the most." Ouyang Chuan suddenly changed the topic and his face darkened. He said coldly, "With your strength, it's impossible for you to kill the Grand Elder of the Blue Dragon sect. This sect leader wants to see just how capable you are." As soon as he finished speaking, Ouyang Chuan's aura suddenly skyrocketed. His face darkened and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Then, a huge pressure pressed down on Ye Tian like a raging wave. "Father, don't." Almost at the same time, Ouyang Yufei's beautiful eyes trembled and she screamed. She never thought that Ouyang Chuan would suddenly attack Ye Tian. Unfortunately, it was too late. Chapter 2191. Ouyang Chuan's aura was extremely terrifying. When it was completely released, it was like a ferocious beast, causing the surrounding space to tremble. At this moment, everyone's eyes trembled violently. They were extremely shocked, as if they could already see a bloody scene. In their opinion, there was no way Nye Tian could withstand Ouyang Chuan's aura. Boom! However, in the next moment, strange black runes suddenly appeared around Nye Tian's body, and his aura instantly skyrocketed to the extreme. A sword aura suddenly rose, like a flood dragon breaking out of the abyss, abnormally powerful. Rumble! In the void, the two auras collided, causing a violent explosion. Then, endless waves of energy exploded in the air, spreading in all directions. Then, an unbelievable scene happened. Bang! Bang! Two muffled sounds rang out. Ouyang Chuan was actually forced to take 2 steps back. In the next moment, the waves of energy in the air dispersed, and Nye Tian's figure appeared. He was standing in the same place, as steady as a mountain. Everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. To them, the scene in front of them was simply impossible. Under the pressure of Ouyang Chuan's aura, not only was Nye Tian not injured at all, but he had even forced Ouyang Chuan to take 2 steps back. This was just too terrifying. It wasn't just the others. Even Ouyang Chuan himself was stunned on the spot. His face was stiff, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. He had never thought that Nye Tian would actually be able to break through his aura. What was even stranger was that the moment Nye Tian's sword aura surged, he actually felt a very real threat. A peak overgod was actually able to threaten him, the sect leader of the Wind God sect. Was this really not a dream? Sect leader Ouyang, you're underestimating me too much if you think you could defeat me with your aura. At this moment, Nye Tian spoke. He looked at Ouyang Chuan indifferently and said in a cold voice, "Now, I'd like to ask you, sect leader Ouyang, do you believe what I just said?" At his peak, Nye Tian was no weaker than an ordinary peak paramount god. The other party had to be at least a half-saint in order to defeat him with his aura alone. Unfortunately, Ouyang Chuan's strength was far from reaching the level of a half-step saint. Ouyang Chuan was confident in his strength, but in the end, he lifted a rock and smashed his own foot. Finally, Ouyang Yufei reacted. She came to Ouyang Chuan's side and asked nervously, "Father, are you okay?" Ouyang Chuan's face reddened in embarrassment, but he soon forced a smile and brought his fists together towards Nye Tian. "Little brother, your strength has indeed exceeded my expectations. This sect master believes your words just now." When the others saw Ouyang Chuan's actions, they couldn't help being stunned. Although Ouyang Chuan didn't say any words of apology, his actions were clearly an apology to Nye Tian. It was as if in his eyes, Nye Tian's status had suddenly risen by a lot, and the two of them were actually on equal footing. Sun Zhangqi was so shocked that his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He had hoped that Ouyang Chuan would avenge him, But Ouyang Chuan was clearly trying to curry favor with Nye Tian. There was no sign that he was going to get revenge. Ouyang Chuan's current attitude was almost subservient. Sun Zhangqi didn't understand why Ouyang Chuan was doing this. Even if Nye Tian had broken through Ouyang Chuan's pressure, that didn't mean he was a match for Ouyang Chuan. If Ouyang Chuan went all out, he could still kill Nye Tian in one move. So why was he taking the initiative to express goodwill to Nye Tian? It's good that you believe me, Sect Master, Nye Tian said with a faint smile. Of course he could tell that Ouyang Chuan was expressing goodwill. Ouyang Chuan smiled and bowed slightly. How should I address you, little brother? There's no need to be so polite, Sect Master Ouyang. I'm a friend of Miss Yufei's. You can call me Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded slightly. As the saying goes, one doesn't hit a smiling person. Since Ouyang Chuan was taking the initiative, he had to show his gratitude. Taking the initiative to say that he was Ouyang Yufei's friend was actually to get closer to Ouyang Chuan. Little friend Nye Tian. Ouyang Chuan smiled faintly. He was very smart and said directly, there was some misunderstanding between you and the Wind God sect, but it's all in the past. Let's forget about it. I accidentally injured your sect's Elder Sunday. If Sect Master Ouyang can let bygones be bygones, of course I can accept it. Nye Tian smiled faintly. That's good. Ouyang Chuan nodded and smiled. Suddenly, his eyes flashed, and he transmitted his voice to Nye Tian. Little friend Nye Tian, to be honest, I acted rashly just now. I didn't want to hurt you. I just want to test your strength. I know. Nye Tian smiled faintly and transmitted his voice as well. Sect Master Ouyang, what's the matter? Just say it. In fact, when Ouyang Chuan had just arrived, Nye Tian had already determined that the former was not here to kill him. Everything Ouyang Chuan had done just now was to verify Nye Tian's talent. If he wanted to kill Nye Tian, he could have done it directly. There was no need to say so much nonsense and play so many tricks. Moreover, Nye Tian could see that Ouyang Chuan had something to ask of him. Just when Ouyang Chuan was forced to take 2 steps back by Nye Tian felt that there was a very cold energy in the former's body, as if it wanted to freeze his meridians. Little friend Nye Tian, you want to enter the 5th layer of the cave, right? Ouyang Chuan looked at Nye Tian with fiery eyes and continued to transmit his voice. I want to ask you to help me take something. As expected, hearing Ouyang Chuan's words, Nye Tian smiled inwardly and said, what does Sect Master Ouyang want me to take? The rheumatism jade. Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled as he said, it's on the 5th layer in the 13th cave. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect Ouyang Chuan to be so familiar with the 1,000 Demons cave that he knew what was in one of the caves on the 5th layer. However, he did not ask too many questions. Instead, he laughed and said, Sect Master Ouyang, you want to use the rheumatism jade to treat the cold energy in your body, right? How did you know? Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled violently. It was obvious that he was quite surprised. He did not expect that Nye Tian could see that he had the cold energy in his body. To tell you the truth, the cold energy in my body is called the 7 evils in chill. It is a hidden injury left behind by an enemy many years ago. After hesitating for a while, Ouyang Chuan still said, the 7 evils in chill is extremely cold. I have been tortured by this cold energy for over 100 years. Now, I can no longer suppress the power of the 7 evils in chill. I need to use the heat energy of the rheumatism jade in order to suppress it. Without the rheumatism jade, I'm afraid I won't be able to keep my life. Saying this, Ouyang Chuan's expression became more serious. For 100 years, he had been tortured by the 7 evils in chill. This feeling was worse than death. Originally, he had come here to kill Nye Tian. However, when he heard that Nye Tian wanted to enter the 5th layer of the cave, he changed his mind. He knew that in the 13th cave on the 5th layer, there was the rheumatism jade that could suppress the 7 evils in chill. Therefore, he asked Nye Tian to help him obtain the rheumatism jade. Chapter 2192. After listening to Ouyang Chuan, Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Sect Leader Ouyang, according to what you said, your current state is already on the verge of death, and you urgently need the rheumatism jade to save your life. I can help you get the rheumatism jade, but I want to ask, why should I do that? Ouyang Chuan was slightly stunned, and his eyes flickered. Of course, he understood what Nie Tian meant. The latter was asking for conditions. Nie Tian, my young friend, what do you want? After a while, Ouyang Chuan glanced at Nie Tian, then turned his gaze to Ouyang Yufei, as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. Nie Tian looked at Ouyang Chuan and couldn't help but smile in his heart. It was obvious that the other party had misunderstood. Ouyang Chuan saw that Nie Tian was asking for conditions, but didn't say it directly, so he thought that the latter was interested in Ouyang Yufei. Moreover, Nie Tian had just said that he was Ouyang Yufei's friend. Sect leader Ouyang, you misunderstood me. Miss Yufei and I are friends, just friends. Nie Tian smiled faintly and no longer hesitated. He directly said, Sect leader Ouyang, I'm very curious. How do you know that there's a rheumatism jade in the 5th floor's 13th cave? Ling Yusong had already told Nie Tian that it was very rare for people to enter the 5th floor's caves. However, Ouyang Chuan seemed to know the 5th floor's caves very well, which was very strange. Ouyang Chuan frowned, and his expression was a little awkward. Obviously, there was something he didn't want to say. Sect leader Ouyang, since you asked for my help, we are in a cooperative relationship. I think, as a cooperative partner, you should at least trust me. Nie Tian smiled faintly, looking very relaxed. Ouyang Chuan's gaze swept over Nie Tian. After a long moment of hesitation, he finally said, Nie Tian, my young friend, to tell you the truth, I have a treasure map that leads to the 1,000 Demons Cave. The 1,000 Demons Cave's treasure map. Hearing Ouyang Chuan's words, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he almost screamed. The 1,000 Demons Cave was a cave in the 7th layer. No one had ever entered it before. Thus, no one knew what was hidden inside. But Ouyang Chuan actually had a treasure map related to the 1,000 Devils Cave. This was truly too astonishing. The value of this treasure map was simply immeasurable. Little friend Nie Tian, don't be too excited. When Ouyang Chuan saw Nie Tian's expression, he laughed bitterly and said, The 1,000 Demon Cave treasure map in my hands is only a fragment and not complete. Nie Tian frowned as he glanced at Ouyang Chuan. The latter did not seem to be lying. Nie Tian, my young friend, this treasure map is an heirloom of my Wind God sect. It's not my personal property, so Ouyang Chuan looked at Nie Tian and said, Sect leader Ouyang, don't worry. I'm not interested in your treasure map. Nie Tian naturally understood Ouyang Chuan's meaning. He smiled lightly and said, But I want to ask you something. Please tell me. Little friend Nie Tian, please ask away. Hearing that Nie Tian did not want the treasure map, Ouyang Chuan let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly nodded in agreement. Sect leader Ouyang, I want to know, which cave has the space-time crystal element? Nie Tian smiled and asked the first question. Space-time crystal element. Ouyang Chuan's eyes flickered. He thought for a while and said, The 5th layer, cave number 17. Are you sure? Nie Tian's lips curled up as he asked again. I'm sure. Ouyang Chuan nodded heavily. He had already memorized the treasure map fragment, so it was impossible for him to remember it wrongly. Good. Second question. Nie Tian nodded. Immediately afterwards, his expression grew serious as he asked, Sectmaster Ouyang, do you have any information about Dragon Spring Veins on your treasure map? Dragon Spring Vein? Ouyang Chuan was startled when he heard these words. He shook his head and said no. Nie Tian let out a wry smile, feeling a little helpless. The Dragon Spring Vein was hidden by sacred Lord Xianlong, so it was normal that the treasure map fragment didn't record it. But if that was the case, things would be a little troublesome. Nie Tian didn't know which cave Lin Chen's brother and his clansmen had entered. How was he going to find them? Let's not think about that for now. Let's settle the matter in front of us first. Nie Tian shook his head and didn't think too much about it. Now that he knew the exact location of the space-time crystal element, the next step was to enter the cave and search for it. Things seemed to be progressing very smoothly. Little friend Nie Tian, which cave do you want to enter next? At this time, Ouyang Chuan's eyes flickered as he suddenly asked. On the 5th floor, The 13th cave had the rheumatism jade, and the 17th cave had the space-time crystal element. Nietian wanted to enter both. Of course, Ouyang Chuan hoped that Nietian would enter the 13th cave and obtain the rheumatism jade for him. Sect leader Ouyang, rest assured, I'm a man of my word. Since I've already promised you, I won't go back on my words. Nietian smiled faintly as he looked at the 1,000 Devil Mountain with a fiery gaze. At this time, in the air outside the 1,000 Devil Mountain, many cultivators were standing in the air trying to enter the 1,000 Devil Cave. Most people chose to enter the first and second layer of the cave. Only a small number of people tried to enter the third and fourth layer. As for the fifth layer, basically no one tried it. Nietian saw that many cultivators, before they could even enter the cave, were bounced back by the powerful restrictive chi. Some people even died under the power of the restrictive chi. Let me try as well. Nietian's lips curved into a smile as he mumbled. He was ready to give it a try. Nietian, little friend, you can start from the second layer and feel the strength of the restrictive chi. Ouyang Chuan was a little worried and suggested to Nietian. Nietian smiled. His silhouette flickered, and he leapt into the air, arriving outside the fifth layer in an instant. This! Ouyang Chuan saw where Nietian was and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Is he planning to enter the fifth layer directly? The others were also looking at Nietian with astonishment on their faces. In their eyes, Nietian trying to enter the fifth layer directly was too crazy. The restrictive chi of the fifth layer was extremely terrifying. In the entire abandoned land, there weren't many cultivators who could enter the fifth layer. At this moment, Nietian stood in the air, staring at the cave in front of him with a fiery gaze. Only now did he discover that each and every cave was marked with a number. These numbers were obviously left behind by someone. Nietian frowned as he thought to himself, "Don't tell me that this 1,000 Demons mountain range was created by someone. Nietian, the mountain in front of you is protected by a gigantic formation." At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out, reminding Nietian, "The restrictive chi of the formation is extremely strong. It's definitely a saint-level restrictive chi. These restrictive chi test the cultivator's talent and willpower. You must be careful. Don't force yourself." "I know." Nietian lightly nodded. Immediately after, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. With a flap of his wings, he dashed towards the 13th cave in the 5th layer. Chapter 2193. Nietian, who was in midair, suddenly frowned when he felt a terrifying pressure coming from behind him. His reaction was extremely quick. In the blink of an eye, he activated the 3 forbidden techniques in his body, causing his aura to skyrocket as he lashed out with his sword. Bang! Rumbling sword intents roared in the air, forming a 3,000-meter-long sword shadow that slashed forward. Boom! The next moment, the illusionary dragon claw collided with the sword shadow, resulting in a terrifying sound as the sword shadow shattered into pieces. In the next moment, the illusory dragon claw smashed directly towards Nietian. "Watch out!" In the blink of an eye, Fat Cat screamed as the aura of death approached. The strength of the attacker was obviously stronger than Nietian. It was impossible for Nietian to resist the attack. At the same time, Nietian could feel a tremendous force approaching him, causing his eyes to shudder. The incoming force was too terrifying. The destructive aura was enough to kill Nietian straight away. Violet Lightning Battle Armor, activate. Shield of the Divine God of Battle, activate. 3 Seals of the Divine God of Battle, Flowing Killing Seal, Destroying Earth Seal, and Annihilating Soul Seal, activate. 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 In the face of life and death, Nietian reacted decisively. His aura skyrocketed as his aura surged in the air. Layers of battle armor, shields, and powerful seals were activated in an instant. His body was encapsulated by streams of energy, which resembled colorful rays of light flowing around his body. Huh! At that instant, a surprised voice could be heard in the sky, which was followed by a cold laugh. "Little brat, you sure have some tricks up your sleeves." Unfortunately, No matter how many life-saving methods you have, it's useless in front of me. The voice was cold and filled with murderous intent. Boom! As soon as the voice was heard, the illusionary dragon claw landed on Chin Nan, causing the air to tremble violently as a terrifying explosion took place. Bang! 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 Immediately after, a series of tearing sounds rang out. The terrifying phantom of the dragon claw directly broke through Nietian's defense. High up in the sky, the light around him grew dimmer and dimmer. Bang! In the end, a muffled sound was heard as the illusory dragon claw struck Nietian's body. His entire body was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. Under countless gazes, Nietian's figure streaked across the sky, leaving a trail of blood behind him. But in the next moment, the strangest thing happened. Pooh! The crimson figure in the air actually pierced through the restrictive barrier of the 5th floor's 13th cave. It was as if he had torn through a layer of paper and directly entered the cave. This! Everyone's eyes widened, and they gasped as if they had seen a ghost. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, but everyone could clearly see a figure being blasted into a cave on the 5th floor with a single move. How powerful was the restrictive power of the 5th layer? It was simply unimaginable. Who would have thought that someone actually entered the 5th layer's cave in such a way? Everyone in the surroundings stared dumbfoundedly at the huge cliff of the Thousand Demons Mountain. The entire place fell into a dead silence. There was no sound for a long time. How is this possible? After a long time, a black-clothed figure appeared high up in the sky. He was also looking at a cave in shock. His face was conflicted like a blooming chrysanthemum. This black-clothed figure was the person who suddenly attacked Nietian. What's going on? That brat entered the 5th layer's cave just like that? The black-clothed figure was speechless. He was simply doubting his own eyes. Originally, he wanted to kill Nietian with one palm. He did not expect that the latter would be slapped into the 5th layer's cave with one palm. Is he not dead? The black-clothed figure frowned, and his expression was very embarrassed. Nietian entered the 5th layer's cave. This undoubtedly meant that he was still alive. A dead person had no talent to speak of. It was impossible for him to enter the Thousand Demons Cave. It's you, Sima Lianzhao. Just as the black-clothed figure was embarrassed, a furious voice rang out, directly shouting the black-clothed figure's name. Then, a figure shot into the sky and confronted Sima Lianzhao. Sima Lianzhao, he's the sect leader of the Blue Dragon sect. The crowd exclaimed when they heard this name. No wonder this person was so strong. He was the sect leader of the Blue Dragon sect. The person confronting Sima Lianzhao was none other than the sect leader of the Wind God sect, Ouyang Chuan. Everything happened in an instant. Ouyang Chuan did not expect that Sima Lianzhao would suddenly appear and attack Nietian. If he had known all this, he would definitely have stopped Sima Lianzhao. Ouyang Chuan, what are you doing? Sima Lianzhao frowned and asked Ouyang Chuan coldly when he sensed the latter's monstrous anger. Sima Lianzhao, why do you want to kill him? Ouyang Chuan's eyes were bloodshot as he roared. Although he knew that Nietian might still be alive, Sima Lianzhao had attacked him head-on. Even if he managed to enter the 5th floor of the cave, he would still die. That kid killed the first elder of the Blue Dragon sect. Isn't it normal for me to kill him? Sima Lianzhao was startled for a moment before he said, Ouyang Chuan, as far as I know, someone from the Wind God sect was injured by this kid too. Shouldn't you be looking for him for revenge? Why do you seem so angry that I killed him? Ouyang Chuan's eyes flickered. He was filled with anger, but he could not vent it out. Sima Lianzhao killing Nietian was equivalent to killing him. However, now that things had come to this, was he really going to fight Sima Lianzhao to the death? Furthermore, he had the 7 evils in chill in his body. If he were to fight Sima Lianzhao to the death, he would most likely lose. Ouyang Chuan let out a roar. He was like a wild beast that had gone mad. Are you crazy? Sima Lianzhao glanced at Ouyang Chuan and actually ignored him. He turned around and was about to leave. Although he knew that Nietian had not died when he entered the 5th floor, he was extremely certain that he was definitely dead right now. He refused to believe that a peak over god could take on his Azure Dragon's hand in a direct confrontation. The Azure Dragon's hand was one of the three great martial skills of the Blue Dragon sect. When Sima Lianzhao used it, it was enough to instantly kill a peak over god. Yet Tian's true strength was only that of a peak over god. It was impossible for him to survive. The crowd all looked at Ouyang Chuan and Sima Lianzhao at this moment. They had no idea what was going on. However, a voice rang out from behind Sima Lianzhao the moment he turned around. "Sect Master Ouyang, I'm not dead yet." A deep, cold voice rang out from the cave. The voice was not loud, but every single word was like a clap of thunder. Everyone's eyes trembled as their faces changed. They were extremely shocked. Nie Tian. Ouyang Chuan's eyes narrowed when he heard the voice, and he immediately cried out. Chapter 2194. Nie Tian. Nie Tian isn't dead. Ouyang Chuan reacted in an instant and exclaimed. He was so excited that he was on the verge of losing his mind. At this moment, everyone else's faces stiffened as they stared dumbfoundedly at the cave where the voice came from. Was Nie Tian really not dead? Everyone looked like they were in a dream, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. The sect master of Blue Dragon sect was a terrifying figure. Nie Tian was sent flying into the cave on the 5th floor after taking a direct hit from him. Even so, he was not dead. No one could believe that something like that had happened. Impossible. That's impossible. Sima Lianzhao's eyes widened, and he screamed in a high-pitched voice. He had never expected that Nie Tian was still alive. In his opinion, Nie Tian was dead for sure after taking a direct hit from his Blue Dragon hand. However, that was not the case. Not only did Nie Tian make a sound, but he was also full of energy. His breathing was stable, and there were no signs of him being seriously injured. Old man, do you think that your palm strike is very powerful? At this moment, Nie Tian's voice resounded once more in the cave, and it seemed to be cold and mocking. Every single word was like a slap to Sima Lianzhao's face. Brat, you... Sima Lianzhao's eyes were dark, and the muscles on his old face were twitching. He was obviously furious. However, there was nothing he could do at the moment because he did not have the ability to enter the 5th floor. Nie Tian, my young friend, you're really not dead. This is great. Ouyang Chuan was so excited to hear Nie Tian's voice again that he was almost incoherent. When he saw Nie Tian being sent flying by Sima Lianzhao, his heart was heavy. Now that Nie Tian was still alive, it was like a life-saving straw had appeared again. How could he not be excited? Sect Master Ouyang, I'm slightly injured, but it's nothing serious. Please wait patiently outside. I'll come out very soon after I get what you want. Nie Tian's voice sounded, and he sounded very calm. Good, good. I'll wait here and won't go anywhere. Ouyang Chuan repeatedly agreed, his face blooming like a chrysanthemum. Finally, he didn't forget to say, Thank you, little friend Nie Tian. Looking at Ouyang Chuan, Sima Lianzhao's face sank. He finally understood why Ouyang Chuan cared so much about Nie Tian. It turned out that Nie Tian had entered the cave to retrieve something for Ouyang Chuan. Smelly brat, I hope you can come out soon, because I, the sect master, will be waiting for you here. In the next moment, Sima Lianzhao said coldly with a dark expression. His eyes were cold, making one's heart palpitate. Old fart, just wait and see. Nie Tian's voice rang out from within the cave, carrying a strong sense of ridicule and provocation. Sima Lianzhao's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping blood, but he could not do anything to Nie Tian. Ouyang Chuan gave Sima Lianzhao a cold stare, his figure hovering in mid-air, guarding the entrance of the cave, waiting for Nie Tian to come out. At that instant, the crowd's expressions changed. Their eyes flickered, as if they were anticipating something. Everyone could tell that Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were both waiting for Nie Tian to come out. However, the two of them had completely different attitudes towards Nie Tian. Sima Lianzhao wanted to kill Nie Tian, while Ouyang Chuan was extremely respectful. Therefore, when Nie Tian came out, wouldn't the two sect masters be at odds with each other? Everyone was looking forward to the moment. The battle between the sect masters of Blue Dragon and the Wind God sect would be spectacular. At the same time, inside the cave, Nietian took a deep breath, and his face, which was as pale as a sheet of paper, slightly improved. The strength of this sect master of Blue Dragon is too terrifying. If it weren't for my martial flesh, I would be a corpse by now. Nietian let out a wry smile and said in a self-mocking tone, "That moment just now was really very dangerous." Sima Lianzhao's palm strike was indeed terrifying. Luckily, Nietian reacted quickly, activating all his defenses at the most crucial moment. The purple lightning battle armor, the shield of the astral spirits, the 3 seals of the divine god of battle were activated at the same time, barely allowing Nietian to survive. One could not help but admit that Nietian's martial flesh was terrifyingly powerful. Otherwise, he would not be able to survive regardless of how many defenses he had. The 9 dragon veins, 800 billion star power, the princess's tear, and the primal chaos flame were all heaven-defying treasures that had greatly enhanced Nietian's martial body. That was why he had survived. Eyebrows furrowed, Nietian muttered, "Compared to the truly powerful experts, I'm still too weak." Sima Lianzhao's strength was not particularly powerful. He was on par with Nie Dao and the others at most, or even slightly weaker. He was nothing compared to a half-saint like Ming Jinyu. But even with that being the case, Sima Lianzhao's full-powered strike had almost killed Nietian. Nietian's true strength was only a peak over God after all. No matter how monstrous his talent was, his battle prowess was still limited. Afterwards, Nietian sat down with his legs crossed and began to slowly recover from his injuries. His injuries were not light, but they were not fatal. He could recover very quickly with the help of the earth vein source. Nietian was in no hurry. He knew that Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan would be waiting for him outside. He had spoken earlier to tell Ouyang Chuan that he was still alive. He wanted to use Ouyang Chuan to kill Sima Lianzhao. He had almost lost his life to Sima Lianzhao, so he obviously could not just let him leave like that. Around an hour later, Nietian stood up. His breathing was stable, and his complexion had completely recovered. Fusing with the earth vein source really does bring great benefits, Nietian murmured with a smile as he exhaled deeply. Great confidence filled his face. His injuries earlier were very heavy. Under normal circumstances, he would need several months to recover. However, with the earth vein source, he only needed an hour to make a full recovery. The 2 sect masters are still here. That's fantastic. Nietian glanced outside the cave. Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were still there. It was as if the 2 of them hadn't moved at all and were just standing there, waiting for Nietian. Afterwards, Nietian prepared to venture deeper into the cave. He needed to find the piece of rheumatism that Ouyang Chuan wanted, or the latter would never risk his life for him. This cave really is strange. There seems to be a profound power in the space. I can clearly sense it, but I can't grasp it. As he ventured deeper and deeper, Nietian sensed a strange power in the space around him. It was very profound. The more he tried to sense the power, the more he felt that it was erratic, as if it was playing hide and seek with him. Nietian, this is a very powerful saint energy. With your current strength, you still can't absorb it. At this moment, the fat cat's voice rang out. Chapter 2195. MHM. Nietian's eyes lit up when he heard the fat cat's words. He nodded and walked forward. This was his first time entering the Thousand Demons Cave. He didn't know what was inside, so he was very cautious. He kept the holographic divine runes on and paid attention to his surroundings. After a while, Nietian came to a cave. Nietian, it's here. The fat cat's voice sounded excited. Nietian nodded. He didn't dare to be careless. He carefully sensed his surroundings to make sure there were no abnormalities. Then he carefully stepped into the cave. The moment he entered the cave, Nietian felt a wave of scorching air assaulting his face, causing his expression to change involuntarily. Only then did he realize that there was a lava lake in the cave. The lava lake wasn't big, but it was emitting an extremely hot aura. Crimson flames were rolling on the surface of the lake, like a huge brazier. Is that all? Nietion looked around. Apart from the lava lake, there was nothing else in the cave. This made him feel very strange. Nietion, the thing you're looking for is in the lake. At this time, the fat cat's voice sounded. In the lake. Nietion heard the fat cat's words, and his eyes trembled. He let out a strange cry and said, Fat, are you saying that the jade of rheumatism is in this lava lake? And Mitchum, the fat cat nodded with a smile and said, I can sense that there is a crimson stone at the bottom of the lake. It should be the jade of rheumatism. This. Nietion's face stiffened. He frowned and said, Do I have to enter the lake? Of course. The fat cat laughed and said, Don't worry. With your martial body, this kind of flame can't hurt you at all. Sensing the aura of the lava lake, Nietion could not help but gasp and murmur, Fatty, are you sure this flame can't hurt me? I'm very sure. Don't worry and just enter the lake. Fat Cat said confidently. Her blue eyes were filled with smiles. All right. Nietion nodded. Then, with a firm look in his eyes, he stepped into the lake and landed in the middle of the lake. Plop! Ah! Just as he fell into the lake, a tragic howl was heard. Nietion felt the terrifying power of the flame invading his body. His entire body's skin actually melted in an instant. That kind of sudden sharp pain, even he couldn't bear it. Fat, what's going on? This kind of flame is so strong. It can melt my skin in an instant. Nietion cried out in pain. Nietion, I only said this kind of flame can't hurt you, but you will still feel a little pain. The fat cat laughed, as if she was taking pleasure in his misfortune. Previously, Nietion had endured the forbidden fire spell in the hands of the mysterious man. His martial body could even withstand the forbidden fire spell. Of course, the flame of the lava lake was not dangerous to him. However, this flame had a strange power. It could melt skin. Even Nietion couldn't stop this power. Nietion screamed and almost cursed. This was not a little pain at all. This was a great pain. Nietion, hurry up. The jade of rheumatism is at the bottom of the lake. Find it quickly, and you can get rid of the pain quickly. The fat cat didn't care and said with a faint smile. Nietion's eyes flickered. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He felt that all his skin had been melted. He estimated that he would only be left with his skeleton. Fortunately, he had the 9 dragon veins and the power of the stars in his body, which could slightly resist the power of the flame. Coupled with the recovery ability of the earth vein source, he could move freely. Then, Nietion didn't hesitate. He moved and dove into the depths of the lava lake. The lava lake wasn't big, but it was very deep. The deeper he went, the stronger the power of the flame. Nietion didn't move fast. It took him about half an hour to reach the bottom of the lake. The jade of rheumatism. The moment he landed, Nietion suddenly saw a crimson jade the size of a baby's fist not far away. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he couldn't help but scream. He was very sure that this jade was the jade of rheumatism that he was looking for. In the next moment, Nietion moved and prepared to take the jade of rheumatism. Stop! However, at that moment, Fat Cat screamed, her voice trembling. Nietion was shocked, and his body froze. Boom! At that moment, the jade of rheumatism suddenly shook in a strange manner. Instantly, a crimson wave of flames surged and rushed straight towards Nietion. Nietion reacted immediately. His body suddenly rose, and he barely dodged the impact of the wave of flames. That was close. Taking a deep breath, Nietion still hadn't recovered from the shock. He asked, Fat, what's going on? It's the restriction of rheumatism. Fat Cat was also shocked. Her face was pale, but she calmed down and said, This is a restriction left by the person who preserved the jade of rheumatism to prevent outsiders from taking it away. The jade of rheumatism is the most precious treasure in the world. It's not something that can be taken away easily. Nietion shook his head and smiled. I was too careless. Ever since he entered the cave, he had been very careful. However, when he saw the jade of rheumatism, he was too excited and almost lost his life. Fortunately, Fat Cat was there. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fat, Can you break the restriction of rheumatism? Nyetian asked after taking a deep breath. Give me some time. Fat Cat nodded. Then she chuckled and said, the restriction of rheumatism is a good thing. When you get out of the cave, you'll need to rely on it to kill the sect master of Tsonglong. Fat, are you coming out? Nyetian was stunned when he heard Fat Cat's words. He asked in surprise. It seemed that Fat Cat was going to come out of the origin fetus space. However, they were at the bottom of the lake. The power of fire was very strong. Even Nyetian could barely withstand it. If Fat Cat came out, his fat would be gone in an instant. Nyetian released the chaotic flame. Fat Cat chuckled and said. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He immediately understood something and released the chaotic flame. A strange scene happened. As the chaotic flame spread, the power of fire around Nyetian was forcefully pushed away. The chaotic flame formed a shield, and the power of fire couldn't get close to Nyetian at all. Nyetian was speechless. If he knew that the chaotic flame could block the power of fire, he wouldn't have to endure so much pain. Fat Cat chuckled and appeared directly. Young man, it's not a bad thing for you to endure a little pain. Nyetian was speechless. It seemed that Fat Cat already knew that the chaotic flame could block the power of fire. It purposely made Nyetian suffer. The chaotic flame is formed by the fusion of two supreme flames. It can suppress all power of fire. I'm too stupid. I didn't think of this. Nyetian smiled bitterly. He wouldn't blame Fat Cat. He could only blame himself for being too stupid. Chapter 2196. The Fat Cat stared at the rheumatism jade for a few minutes. Its entire face was frozen. Nyetian did not know what the Fat Cat was doing. He did not dare to disturb the latter and could only watch from the side. It is indeed a terrifying restrictive force. Very good. After a while, the Fat Cat finally reacted. It smiled and released colorful glaze, runes from its body. The runes slowly surged in the air and enveloped the rheumatism jade. At that moment, Nyetian finally saw that the surface of the rheumatism jade was enveloped by a very strange shield. Countless mysterious runes surged and released an extremely strange force. Nyetian secretly used the holographic sacred sigil to sense the runes. He immediately felt a vast and boundless force. At that moment, he felt that it was no longer a piece of jade in front of him. Instead, it was a vast and boundless ocean. What a strange feeling! Nyetian frowned, and his expression slowly turned into one of shock. He did not expect such a powerful rune restriction to exist in this world. And at this moment, a strange scene happened. The glazed runes began to circulate wildly and absorb the power of the rune restriction bit by bit. Seeing this, Nyetian's eyes could not help but narrow. He was extremely shocked in his heart. Lil Fatty is too abnormal. He can actually absorb such a powerful restrictive force. He did not expect the Fat Cat to become so strong. It did not break the restrictive force, but directly absorbed it. Nyetian, everything in this world has its own rules, Nyetian said. At that moment, the Fat Cat saw the doubt in Nyetian's mind. It smiled and said, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the power of the divine energy, the sacred energy, the power of the formation, the power of the restriction, the power of the seal, all of them are the same. As long as you can understand the rules, you will be able to control this power. As it spoke, the Fat Cat controlled the glazed runes and continuously absorbed the power of the rheumatism jade. Nyetian was deeply shocked and nodded slightly. Although the Fat Cat made it sound easy, Nyetian knew that it would be extremely difficult to achieve this. There were thousands of rules in the world, but those who could truly grasp them were few and far between. The reason why the Fat Cat knew so much was partly because of the nine-tailed chinchilla's special ability to sense the world, and partly because of the nine-tailed chinchilla's special inherited memories. Everything the Fat Cat knew was not learned by itself, but inherited from countless nine-tailed chinchilla ancestors. Needless to say, the nine-tailed chinchilla's inherited memories were indeed terrifying. After about an hour, the Fat Cat finally stopped what she was doing and retracted the glazed rune. Fatty, are you done? Nyetian's eyes were hot. unable to conceal the excitement in his heart. The fat cat nodded and smiled. The rheumatism jade has basically been absorbed by me. You can do it now. As it spoke, it suddenly turned to look at its buttocks and chuckled. Fortunately, I grew a seventh tail. Otherwise, it would be impossible to absorb the rheumatism jade. Nietion was stunned for a moment. He looked over and realized that the fat cat had unknowingly grown a seventh tail. Back then, when Nietion brought the fat cat out of the glazed demon pagoda, the latter only had one tail. When a nine-tailed chinchilla was fully grown, it had 9 tails. The reason why the fat cat could grow so quickly was all thanks to the power of Nietion's celestial demon ocean. Do it. The fat cat glanced at Nietion and then moved back into the origin fetus space. Nietion nodded slightly and took a step forward. He was still a little worried and was very cautious. But this time, when he approached the rheumatism jade, he did not feel any impact. In the next instant, he placed his palm down and held the rheumatism jade in his hand. I finally got the rheumatism jade. Looking at the rheumatism jade in his hand, Nietion smiled. He was very happy. Everything was going very smoothly. Next, it was time to leave the cave. The process of getting the rheumatism jade seemed easy, but it was actually very dangerous. Without the fat cat, Nietion would not have been able to get the rheumatism jade. Nietion kept the rheumatism jade and immediately left the lava lake. He walked out of the cave and soon arrived at the entrance of the cave. At this time, Nietion saw that Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were still standing in the air, not moving at all. Both of them were very patient. One wanted to kill Nietion, and the other needed Nietion to save his life. Ouyang Chuan, the flowing flame jade is your life-saving treasure. For this thing, you won't hesitate to fall out with Sima Lianzhao, right? Nietion swept his eyes over Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan, the corners of his mouth curling into a faint smile. He and Ouyang Chuan had a cooperative relationship, but it was only a cooperative relationship, nothing more. If Ouyang Chuan did not pay a price, Nietion would not hand over the rheumatism jade. To Nietion, Ouyang Chuan was not a good person. If not for Nietion's talent, Ouyang Chuan would not be so courteous to Nietion. He might even kill him with his own hands. Sect leader Ouyang, I've got the item you wanted. Nietion took a deep breath and shouted loudly, his voice resonating in the air. Nietion, my young friend. Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled. He could only hear Nietion's voice, but he could not see the latter. Brat, you're finally coming out? At the same time, Sima Lianzhao laughed coldly and said in a deep voice, I'd like to see what kind of monster you are to be able to block my blue dragon palm. His voice was deep and murderous. Sima Lianzhao had been waiting impatiently. When the crowd heard Nietion's voice, their eyes lit up. They were also waiting for Nietion to appear. What they were curious about was whether Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan would fight to the death for Nietion. Sect leader Ouyang, I'm going out now. You don't want anything to happen to me, right? Nietion's voice was heard again, this time with a heavy sense of mockery. Nietion, my young friend, don't worry and come out. With me, Ouyang Chuan, here, I will not allow anyone to hurt you. Ouyang Chuan, of course, understood Nietion's meaning. He shouted loudly and locked his gaze on Sima Lianzhao. Ouyang Chuan, are you crazy? Sima Lianzhao could feel Ouyang Chuan's hostility. He frowned and said in a low voice, You really want to fight me for this kid? Sima Lianzhao, Nietion is my friend. I will not allow anyone to hurt him. Ouyang Chuan's eyes were dark and cold. Leave now and I will not stop you. If you dare to attack Nietion, don't blame me for being merciless. The cold voice was very decisive. Ouyang Chuan, it seems like you're determined to protect this kid. Sima Lianzhao's confused expression darkened as he responded. Do you really think I, Sima Lianzhao, am afraid of you? Since you want to fight, then I will fight with you. At this moment, countless people were waiting to see how the Blue Dragon sect would survive in the burial cloud mountain if Sima Lianzhao left. Most importantly, he felt threatened by Nietion. Chapter 2197. I'll fight with you. Sima Lianzhao's words made the onlookers tense up. It seemed that the sect masters of the Blue Dragon sect and the Wind Divine sect were really going to fight to the death. In the Burial Cloud Mountain Range, Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were both peak overlords. Everyone was looking forward to their battle. At this time, Ouyang Yufei and Ling Yusong looked at Ouyang Chuan from afar. Their faces were tense, and they were obviously very nervous. One was Ouyang Chuan's daughter, and the other was his disciple. Of course, they were worried about the latter's safety. Ouyang Chuan glanced at the cave and saw that Nie Tian showed no signs of coming out. So he said in a cold tone, "Sima Lianzhao, make your move." Of course, he knew that Nie Tian was waiting for him to make his move. If he didn't kill Sima Lianzhao, Nie Tian wouldn't come out. It had to be said that Nie Tian's move was indeed vicious. He forced Ouyang Chuan and Sima Lianzhao to fight to the death. Ouyang Chuan was already on the verge of death. If he didn't make his move, he could only wait for death. If he made his move, he might be lucky enough to defeat Sima Lianzhao and survive. More importantly, Ouyang Chuan had other plans. If he could obtain the Rheumatism Jade, not only would he be able to get rid of the 7 evils in Chill, but he could also absorb the power inside the Rheumatism Jade and step into the semi-sage realm. Such a huge temptation was enough to make him fight to the death. "Fine, as you wish." Sima Lianzhao sneered, and the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. He suddenly moved and struck out with his palm. Boom! The void trembled and the shadow of a dragon claw appeared. It was huge and boundless, and like a rolling wave, it pressed down on Ouyang Chuan. Seeing this, Ouyang Chuan's eyes narrowed, and he struck out with his palm as well. An illusory palm shadow appeared in the air. What a strong aura! When the crowd saw this, their eyes trembled and their hearts were filled with shock. The aura of a peak immortal state cultivator was indeed terrifying. Kaboom! The next moment, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the shadow of the dragon claw and the shadow of the void collided with a loud bang. The void suddenly trembled, and then endless wild waves surged from the center of the collision, rushing in all directions. The crowd was pushed back by the shockwave. On the ground, there were actually several terrifying ravines torn open, and the ground was set off in waves of gravel and dirt that were tens of meters high. Chi, chi, chi. Ear-piercing noises sounded out from the sky, and only after a long time did the violent airwaves dissipate. 2 silhouettes appeared in the sky, and they were Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan. The aura around the two of them surged as they stood there like 2 mountains. Ouyang Chuan, your strength seems to be weaker than I expected. Sima Lianzhao's lips twitched as he revealed a strange smile. It's enough to defeat you, Ouyang Chuan replied in a cold tone. However, a trace of panic flashed across his eyes. He had fought Sima Lianzhao head-on, and while it seemed like he wasn't at a disadvantage, he had paid a heavy price. The 7 evils in Chill in his body had been stimulated, and now it was slowly becoming violent. If the 7 evils in Chill grew stronger, even if Sima Lianzhao didn't attack, Ouyang Chuan's life would be in danger. With Sima Lianzhao's strength, he instantly sensed the 7 evils in Chill in Ouyang Chuan's body. This was something he hadn't expected. If he had known that Ouyang Chuan had an unmentionable injury, he would have attacked him long ago. The Blue Dragon sect and the Wind sect were both the top forces in the Burial Cloud Mountains. On the surface, the 2 sects maintained a relationship of equality, but in reality, they both had the ambition to destroy the other. However, the 2 sects' strength was similar, and they both feared each other, so they had always maintained a harmonious relationship. If Sima Lianzhao had known that Ouyang Chuan was just an embroidered pillow, he would have attacked the Wind sect long ago. Ouyang Chuan, you have a tough mouth, but unfortunately, you are not strong enough. Sima Lianzhao laughed wildly, and then directly attacked Ouyang Chuan with an even more violent palm. Boom, boom, boom. In the sky, there was a continuous violent sound. People could no longer see Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan, and could only see endless waves rolling in the sky. Bang! A moment later, there was a muffled sound, and then a figure flew out, drawing a bloody trail in the air. Wind sect leader. The crowd's eyes widened, and they immediately recognized that the bloody figure was Ouyang Chuan. Ouyang Chuan barely stabilized his body, and his whole body was covered with blood, and there were several frightening wounds on his body. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. What? The onlookers all took in a long breath of cold air. They were all confused and shocked. In everyone's opinion, the Blue Dragon sect and the Wind sect were sects of the same level, so the strength of the two sect leaders should be about the same. But now, Ouyang Chuan was completely suppressed by Sima Lianzhao, and he couldn't even fight back. This didn't conform to the crowd's understanding. Ouyang Chuan's aura was very strong, and it was obvious that he was on par with Sima Lianzhao. Why was he losing in the fight? Little did they know that Ouyang Chuan was suppressed by the seven evils Yin Chill, so his aura was getting weaker and weaker. Ouyang Chuan wasn't defeated by Sima Lianzhao, but by the seven evils Yin Chill in his body. Father, teacher. At this moment, Ouyang Yufei and Ling Yusong's voices sounded almost at the same time. Both of them were extremely nervous, especially Ouyang Yufei, whose eyes were already filled with tears. The person who had been beaten to a bloody pulp was her father. How could she not be sad to see her father being beaten up like this? But there was nothing she could do at this moment because she was too weak. Ha ha! In the sky, Sima Lianzhao laughed wildly, and he was extremely arrogant. Ouyang Chuan, you really gave me a big surprise. I really didn't expect the dignified Wind sect leader to be an embroidered pillow. You look good on the outside, but you're useless. To think that I, the sect master, had placed so much importance on you and treated you as a true opponent. Your strength is simply too disappointing. His arrogant voice was full of disdain and pride. Sima Lianzhao, Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled, and he was about to speak, but he vomited a mouthful of blood. Actually, he wasn't seriously injured, but the seven evils Yin Chill in his body was too overbearing, and it almost froze all the meridians in his body. He was furious, and he was unwilling to accept this. If it wasn't for the seven evils Yin Chill, he wouldn't have been defeated so badly. Ouyang Chuan, accept your death obediently. In the next moment, Sima Lianzhao's face darkened, and he walked over step by step. With every step he took, the killing intent in his eyes intensified. Sima Lianzhao, don't you want to kill me first? But at this moment, a mocking voice sounded behind Sima Lianzhao, causing him to stop moving, and he suddenly turned around. In the air, a figure walked out of the cave, and a pair of eyes stared at Sima Lianzhao indifferently. Brat, how dare you come out? Sima Lianzhao's eyes narrowed, and his killing intent grew. Chapter 2198. It's that guy. Nie Tian's sudden appearance caused everyone's eyes to widen as they cried out in alarm. No one had thought that Nie Tian would walk out of the cave at this moment. Ouyang Chuan had already lost and was about to die in Sima Lianzhao's hands. Wasn't Nie Tian digging his own grave by walking out at this moment? Nie Tian, my young friend. Ouyang Chuan frowned when he saw Nie Tian. He was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. He had thought that Nie Tian wouldn't come out after he was defeated by Sima Lianzhao. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Nie Tian would walk out of the cave and challenge Sima Lianzhao. Young man, you've got guts. Sima Lianzhao stared at Nie Tian with a cold smile. I didn't expect you to have the guts to come out. I have to admit that I'm surprised by your guts. The cold voice was filled with a strong killing intent. Sima Lianzhao's eyes were extremely cold, and at the same time, there was an unconcealable shock in them. He had already sensed Nie Tian's body and found that Nie Tian's chi had completely recovered. He couldn't believe it. Just a few hours ago, Nie Tian had been hit by his palm. How strong was Nie Tian's martial body? You can't kill me. Why wouldn't I dare to come out? Nie Tian looked at Sima Lianzhao with a cold smile. You little brat, you. Sima Lianzhao frowned. He suddenly felt a lump in his throat and couldn't say a word. Nie Tian was obviously mocking him. He had failed to kill Ouyang Chuan with his palm. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Nie Tian's mouth as he glanced at Ouyang Chuan and said, Sectmaster Ouyang, I've seen your sincerity. You've done well. Leave the rest to me. The indifferent voice wasn't loud, but the moment it landed, everyone's expression changed, following which the entire place fell into dead silence. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nietion, as if suspecting that they had heard wrongly. Nietion had just said that he would take care of the rest. What did that mean? Could it be that he was going to fight Sima Lianzhao? Most people could tell that Nietion was only a peak over god. How was it possible for him to fight Sima Lianzhao? Even the sect master of the Divine Wind sect had lost to Sima Lianzhao. Could an over-god defeat Sima Lianzhao? Brat, what did you just say? I didn't hear you clearly. Can you repeat yourself? Sima Lianzhao was stunned for a moment before he sneered and asked in a strange tone. I said, leave your life to me. Nietion's expression turned cold as he said word by word, Sima Lianzhao. Do you understand now? Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Sima Lianzhao started laughing. It was as if he had gone mad. It was the funniest joke he had ever heard in his life. Wasn't it funny for an over-god to be so arrogant to this extent? In the next moment, the crowd returned to their senses and began to laugh. Is this kid an idiot? He's an over-god, yet he dares to challenge a peak over-god so arrogantly. Just how sick of living is he? I thought my ears were broken. This kid's just a joke. Silver Hair is quite the character. It's a pity that his brain is filled with paste. He's looking for death in such a strange way. The discussions of the crowd were getting more and more unpleasant. Nietion did not care at all. He directly took a step forward and stared at Sima Lianzhao strangely. He growled, Sima Lianzhao, I only need a single move to kill you. Sima Lianzhao's face immediately darkened when he heard Nietion's words. His aura erupted, and he roared out, Brat, your joke ends here. Sima Lianzhao directly struck out with both hands. Immediately, boundless power gathered in the air, causing the space there to tighten. Roar! In the next moment, the shadow of a 10,000-meter-long azure dragon appeared. It raised its head to the sky and let out a furious roar that shook the heavens and earth. This is... Ouyang Chuan's eyes widened when he saw this. Two words appeared in his mind. Azure Dragon rages the heavens. The martial skill that Sima Lianzhao was using was the strongest of the Blue Dragon sect's 3 signature martial skills. Azure Dragon rages the heavens. Sima Lianzhao did not use this move when he fought Ouyang Chuan earlier. Now, he was actually using it on Nietion. It was clear how much he wanted to kill Nietion. Die! Sima Lianzhao let out a fierce roar as he summoned an azure dragon shadow, which surged towards Nietion, stirring up endless raging waves. The crowd's eyes widened. Their nerves were stretched to the limit. It was as if they could already see Nietion being killed in an instant. Good timing. Nietion showed no fear in the face of Sima Lianzhao's ultimate move. Instead, he had a playful look on his face. The corners of his mouth twitched as he said, Lil Fei, it's up to you now. No problem. I've been waiting for this moment. Fat Cat chuckled slyly. Boom! Like a raging sea, the illusory azure dragon came crashing down from the sky and was about to slam into Nietion. In the nick of time, a strange scene occurred. All of a sudden, numerous magical symbols appeared around Nietion, which instantly enveloped his entire body. Next, let me see how strong these rheumatism restriction runes are. Fat Cat chuckled proudly. These mysterious runes were the rheumatism restriction runes that he had absorbed. Fat Cat had said before that if Nietion wanted to kill Sima Lianzhao, he would have to rely on the rheumatism restriction runes. Bang! Boom! In the next moment, the shadow of the azure dragon fell and directly smashed into the barrier. After a muffled sound, a terrifying force surged and turned into a ripple of light in the air, instantly surging. Bang! 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 Wherever the ripples of light passed, the destructive power destroyed everything. The azure dragon's shadow was directly shattered. This, Sima Lianzhao, was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, and he exclaimed in shock as he tried to retreat. Unfortunately, it was too late. Bang! Sima Lianzhao didn't have time to react. His body was covered by the ripple of light. After a slight tremble, he exploded in the air. The dignified Azure Dragon sect leader didn't even have time to scream before he turned into a bloody light and disappeared. The next moment, the ripple of light became visible to the naked eye and dissipated into the air. The sudden turn of events caused everyone's faces to freeze. Countless eyes glazed over, as if they had fallen into a dream. Azure Dragon's sect leader, Sima Lianzhao, a peak paramount god, a famous expert in the burial cloud mountains, had died just like that. No one could accept what had just happened, and they were completely petrified. The entire scene fell into a deathly silence. Chapter 2199. Tian stood high up in the sky, his eyes slightly trembling. After a long time, he couldn't help but smile. The power of the rheumatism restriction rune was too strong, far beyond his expectations. When Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were fighting before, Fat Cat told Tian that the power of the rheumatism restriction rune was enough to injure Sima Lianzhao in an instant. Then, Tian would add another sword strike to kill Sima Lianzhao. But now, the power of the rheumatism restriction rune was beyond imagination. Sima Lianzhao was killed without Tian even having to do anything. In the origin fetus space, Fat Cat's mouth was wide open, but no sound came out. Obviously, he had also underestimated the power of the rheumatism restriction rune. Fat, why is the power of the restriction rune so strong? Tian finally reacted and couldn't help but ask. I didn't expect it either. Fat Cat shook its head, and its eyes suddenly flickered. It seems that the value of the rheumatism jade is greater than I expected. The rheumatism restriction rune was used to protect the rheumatism jade. The stronger the power of the restriction rune, the more precious the rheumatism jade was. At this moment, Fat Cat felt that it was a bit reluctant to give the rheumatism jade to Ouyang Chuan. Fat, the rheumatism jade is an agreement between Lord Ouyang and me. Tian knew what Fat Cat was thinking. He smiled faintly, and then his eyes flickered with a strange light. I'm just taking it for him. But the power of the restriction rune is also terrifying. It's almost comparable to the attack of a half-saint. Doesn't that mean that I can fight against a half-saint with the power of the restriction rune? Hearing Tian's words, Fat Cat couldn't help but smile bitterly. Tian, you're thinking too much. I only absorbed the rheumatism restriction rune, but didn't fuse with it. The restriction rune has been used up. I don't have the power of the rheumatism restriction rune anymore. Hearing Fat Cat's words, Tian's face stiffened. He was speechless. He had thought that the flowing flame restriction rune could be used at any time, but who knew that it could only be used once? But even if it was just once, it was enough to shock. At this moment, everyone's dumbfounded expression was enough to show how shocked they were. Tian's eyes swept over everyone before finally locking onto Ouyang Chuan. Taking out the flowing flame jade, he took a step forward and said, Sect Master Ouyang, this is what you wanted. Feeling a burning power, Ouyang Chuan's stiff face instantly reacted. He took out the rheumatism jade and took a step forward, saying, Sect Leader Ouyang, this is what you wanted. Feeling a burning power, Ouyang Chuan's stiff face instantly reacted. His eyes lit up, and he reached out to catch the rheumatism jade. The rheumatism jade. It really is the rheumatism jade. Feeling the rheumatism jade's aura, Ouyang Chuan was so excited that he couldn't control himself and shouted like a madman. Tian frowned and laughed in his heart. Isn't it just a fire attribute jade? Is there a need to be so excited? Little did he know that the rheumatism jade held a special meaning for Ouyang Chuan. With the rheumatism jade, not only could Ouyang Chuan escape the torture of the seven evils, but he could also use the power within the rheumatism jade to advance to the half-sage realm. Tian, I estimate that if this guy can completely absorb the power of the rheumatism jade, he can at least advance to the half-sage realm, or even stronger. Fat Cat laughed and said to Tian. Tian's eyes flickered. No wonder Ouyang Chuan was so happy. But Tian didn't feel the pinch. He was a man of his word. The rheumatism jade was a trade item. It should have been given to Ouyang Chuan. Ouyang Chuan did almost die in Sima Lianzhao's hands. Just based on this, he deserved the rheumatism jade. With a faint smile, Nie Tian said, Sectmaster Ouyang, I've done what you asked me to do. Now it's time for me to do my own thing. With that, he turned around and fixed his gaze on the 17th cave on the 5th floor. Next, he was going to look for the space-time crystal element. After finding the space-time crystal element, he would deal with Lin Shun. Nie Tian. However, just as Nie Tian turned around, a cold and deep voice sounded behind him, revealing a strong, killing intent. Nie Tian frowned. He felt the voice was very familiar. The next moment, he reacted. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he shouted a name, In Xianyue. Suddenly turning around, a green-clothed figure appeared in front of him. It was none other than the eldest princess of the Yue Empire, In Xianyue. Nie Tian, I've finally found you. In Xianyue smiled coldly, her eyes flashing with unconcealable killing intent. In Xianyue. At this time, the onlookers suddenly reacted. Their expressions changed slightly as they remembered In Xianyue's identity. She's the eldest princess of the Yue Empire, In Xianyue. Someone exclaimed, his eyes wide open. The Yue Empire was considered a top force in the entire abandoned land, so the eldest princess, In Xianyue, was also very famous. No one expected that the famous eldest princess of the Yue Empire would appear here. And looking at In Xianyue's posture, it was obvious that she was here for Nie Tian. Could there be some enmity between Princess In Xianyue and this silver-haired boy? The crowd guessed in their hearts, their eyes shining, obviously looking forward to a more exciting show. It should be easy to find me. At this time, Nie Tian looked at In Xianyue, smiled faintly, and said with an extremely provocative look in his eyes, Eldest Princess In, it seems that the lesson last time was not deep enough. Did you come all the way here to let me teach you another lesson? Nie Tian, what are you being so arrogant for? In Xianyue was ridiculed and provoked by Nie Tian, and suddenly became furious. She roared, and her eyes seemed to want to eat Nie Tian. Oh, I forgot to ask you, does your face still hurt? Nie Tian sneered, and the ridicule in his eyes became more obvious. Nie Tian, you... In Xianyue heard Nie Tian's words, and suddenly her chest trembled, and her whole body swayed. She felt a lump of stuffiness in her throat that she couldn't swallow or spit out. It was very uncomfortable. How could she forget that Nie Tian had slapped her more than a dozen times in a row, and her pretty face became like a pig's head? She would never forget this humiliation. It was precisely because of this that she traveled thousands of miles to hunt down Nie Tian. Those dozen slaps were like steel needles piercing her heart, making her feel heartache all the time. If she couldn't kill Nie Tian, the steel needles in In Xianyue's heart would never be pulled out. Nie Tian's words, "Does your face still hurt?" simply tore open In Xianyue's scar, making her become manic and about to go crazy at any time. "You stand down." At this moment, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded in the void, and then a black shadow flashed. Chapter 2200. Nie Tian frowned when he saw a black-robed man suddenly appear. His eyes locked onto the latter. It was an extremely handsome young man. His facial features were extremely exquisite, more exquisite than most women's. However, his eyes were cold and dark. They were like the night sky, causing his entire being to emit an extremely gloomy aura. At this moment, Fat Cat's surprised voice sounded in Nie Tian's consciousness. A night elf. A night elf? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard this name, and his expression changed. He did not expect that the man who appeared in front of him was a night elf. No wonder this man's appearance was so exquisite. It turned out that he was not a human, but an elf. Nie Tian had long known that the night elves were in the Forsaken Land, but he did not expect to meet a night elf here. After knowing the other party's identity, he could not help but activate the holographic divine glyphs to sense the other party's aura more carefully. This night elf should be around 10,000 years old, but his strength was already in the late Supreme God stage. Moreover, his aura was very powerful, stronger than the average peak Supreme God stage martial artist. He was obviously a genius. Seventh Prince. At this moment, Yin Xianyue glanced at the black-robed man beside him and instantly calmed down. He bowed slightly in a respectful manner. Nie Tian could not help but frown when he heard how Yin Xianyue addressed the black-robed man, and his expression became even gloomier. This night elf status was obviously not low. He was actually a prince. The black-robed man was called Yi Qinxiang, the seventh prince of the Dying Night Empire. Very few people had heard of the Dying Night Empire. It was a super empire hidden in the dark. The Yingwei Empire was only a vassal force of the Dying Night Empire. This was why Yin Xianyue was so respectful to Yi Qinxiang. Yin Tian? Yi Qinxiang's eyes flickered slightly. He was obviously observing Ye Tian, and then he smiled coldly and said, I didn't expect your strength to be only at the peak of the over-god stage. What? Are you looking down on peak over-gods? Ye Tian smiled faintly, his expression very calm. Humph. Yi Qinxiang laughed strangely and said, If I'm not wrong, the power that killed Sect Master Blue Dragon just now wasn't yours, right? Sect Master Tsang Long is dead. He died by my hands. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and he said with a faint smile, As for whether or not I'm using my own power, is that important? With sharp tongue. The corner of Yi Qinxiang's mouth rose, and he said in a deep voice, Looks like this prince's trip was not in vain. I've indeed met an interesting opponent. Interesting opponent? Nye Tian laughed and asked coldly, You must be mistaken. When did I say that I wanted to be your opponent? Yi Qinxiang's gaze trembled. She clearly hadn't expected Nye Tian to say such a thing. However, in the next moment, he smiled and his expression darkened. Whether or not you are my opponent is not up to you to decide. It's up to me to decide. Another arrogant idiot. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and his eyes were full of disdain. Yi Qinxiang's talent was not bad, but his IQ was not up to standard. Generally speaking, people who showed off their arrogance and scrupulously were not very smart. Since you're willing to accompany Yin Xianyue all the way here, it seems that the relationship between the two of you is not ordinary, Nye Tian said with a smile. Yi Qinxiang had always called Yin Xianyue Yuer, which meant that the relationship between the two of them was not simple. This made Nye Tian a little curious. Yuer is my woman. Yi Qinxiang replied coldly, and his eyes darkened. You hurt her. As her man, of course I have to seek revenge. Your woman? Nye Tian couldn't help but laugh when he heard this answer. He said coldly, It seems that Yin Xianyue framed Gale Xiao back then because of you. Yin Xianyue used to be Gale Zhao's fiancée, and the two of them were almost married. However, Yin Xianyue still framed Gale Xiao in the end, which undoubtedly meant that she already had a better candidate in mind. Now that Yi Qinxiang had taken the initiative to admit that he was Yin Xianyue's man, it was clear that Yin Xianyue had given up on Gale Xiao because of him. Gale Xiao. The corner of Yi Qinxiang's mouth twitched when he heard this name, and he said coldly, In my eyes, the Gale clan is like an ant. With a word from me, the Gale clan will completely disappear from this abandoned land. You're comparing Gale Xiao to me. That's an insult to me. Let me put it this way. I'm a dragon, and the Gale Xiao you speak of is just a loach in a stinky dish. Isn't it normal for you heir to choose me? After saying that, Yi Qinxiang raised her eyebrows very high, looking at Nye Tian with a condescending attitude, extremely arrogant. Is that so? Upon hearing Yi Qinxiang's words, Nye Tian's expression slowly darkened. He said, But in my eyes, you're not a flood dragon from the ninth heaven, and Gale Little isn't a loach in a stinking ditch. You're stronger than Gale Xiao now, because you're a night elf, the seventh prince. Without these identities, you might not be stronger than Gale Xiao. Yin Xianyue gave up on Gale Xiao and chose you not because she had high standards, but because she was blind. At the end of his words, the coldness in Nye Tian's eyes was very obvious. Gale Xiao was his friend, so how could he be insulted by Yi Qinxiang? Nye Tian, you're too arrogant. As soon as Nye Tian's voice faded, Yin Xianyue let out a shrill roar and said coldly, Do you know who the person standing in front of you is? The words blind were not only mocking Yin Xianyue, but also Yi Qinxiang. In Ye Tian's opinion, Gale Xiao Xiao was 100 times stronger than Yi Chenxiang. Back then, Gale Xiao Xiao went from being the #1 genius of the Gale clan to a disgrace in the eyes of his clansmen. This drastic change from heaven to hell did not defeat him. His courage alone was very strong. On the other hand, Yi Chenxiang was just an arrogant idiot. If the same thing happened to him, he probably would not even have the courage to live. In Xianyue, do you think I care about his identity? Nie Tianling laughed, the corners of his mouth raised provocatively. He did not take Yi Chenxiang seriously at all. He did not care about Yi Chenxiang's identity. As long as the latter dared to make a move, he would not show mercy. Very well. Suddenly, Yi Chenxiang's voice sounded. The two words seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. A pair of cold eyes stared in Ye Tian, and he said in a deep voice, Ye Tian, since you don't take this prince seriously, then you can go to hell. The corner of Yi Chenxiang's eyes twitched, and he suddenly roared, Come out.